We're ready to begin, Mr. President.
Thank you. And hello, everyone. Welcome to our board meeting. It is Friday, March 25th. It is just after 9:30 a.m. And let's do a call to order and roll call and establish the quorum, please.
Certainly, Mr. President. I will be conducting that today. When board members, when you hear your name, please say yes. John Harabidian.
I'm here.
Ruben Osorio.
Yes, I'm here.
Dr. Amy Mateki.
Yes, I'm here.
Dr. Yangping Chen.
Yes, I'm here.
Thank you. Francisco Kim.
Yes, I'm here.
And Dr. Shudong Lee.
I'm here.
Thank you so much, members. Mr. President, we have quorum. We may begin.
Excellent. Thank you so much. We won't take public comment on the quorum on item number 1, but we'll just go right into President's remarks. I do want to welcome my board members. Hello, everyone. It's nice to be back with you, staff, and members of the public. We are, this is just a one-day meeting, and our last meeting was at the end of December, so it's been a few months. We have a pretty relatively light agenda, and so this could move pretty quickly. And so we, ask folks to hang in there and stay with us, because I think we will move pretty quickly relative to other meetings. And we look forward to hearing your public comments on all the items. And please weigh in whenever you can. And with that, I will open this up for public comment.
And this is the moderator. We are opening up the Q&A feature of WebEx to facilitate public comment. If you would like to make a comment, you can look for the question mark icon, typically in the lower right corner of your computer screen, or behind the 3-dot other options if you're using a mobile device. Type the word comment into the text box and click send. We will recognize people in the order that they requested to comment. Each person will be given 3 minutes to speak with a 30-second warning. But remember, you cannot speak more than once. And I do not see any requests for public comment at this time. Shall I close the Q&A feature?
Please, thank you.
You're welcome.
We'll move on to item number 3, which is a review and approval of the December 9th and 10th, 2021 board meeting minutes. Mr. Bodea, any comments, or should we just see if there's any questions or clarifications on the minutes?
Indeed, we can open it up to the board members to see if there's any items.
Board members, any changes?
No, I don't see any.
I don't. No, I don't.
Is it him? Yeah.
Okay. Well, unless there is any changes, I will take a motion, and then before we vote on the motion, I'll open up for public comment. Do I have a motion to approve?
Yes.
Thank you. Dr. Mateki, do I have a second?
I'm second.
Well, I guess Dr. Mateki made the motion. I'll second it.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
Noted.
And we'll open up for public comment.
And this is the moderator. We're opening up the Q&A feature of WebEx to facilitate public comment. If you have any comment on the minutes, you can look for the question mark icon, type the word comment in the text box, and click send. If you are on a mobile device, you can look for that behind the 3-dot other options icon. And I do not see any requests for public comment. Shall I close the Q&A?
Please, thank you.
You're welcome.
I'll go ahead and take the roll call vote. Members, when you hear your name, please say aye or nay or abstain on the motion to approve the meeting minutes by Dr. Immunteki, seconded by Mr. Harbidian. Mr. Harbidian.
Aye.
Mr. Osorio. Mr. Osorio, we do not hear you.
Yes.
Thank you. Ms. Mateki.
Yes.
Ms. Chen.
Aye.
Mr. Kim.
Aye.
Mr. Lee.
Aye.
Thank you so much. We have 6-0. The motion passes to approve the meeting minutes from December. That is the end of this item.
Appreciate it. We will move on to item number 4, which is the executive management report. And I'll hand this over to our executive director, Mr. Beau.
Thank you, Mr. President. I would like to call upon our DCA budget analyst, Jennifer Tompkins, to provide us with the budget update.
Hello. I just want to make sure that you can hear me okay. Can you hear me?
Indeed. Thank you.
Okay, great. I did pull together the FM6 projections, and they are looking really healthy. So everything is looking very healthy for acupuncture.
Thank you, Ms. Tompkins. Board members, we have provided you the fund condition and the expenditure projection report. Are there any questions on any of the information displayed? Hearing none, we can go ahead and move on to the next item. Thank you, Ms. Tompkins.
Thank you.
For the staffing update, we are currently conducting interviews for the enforcement analyst position that we have vacant at the moment. Additionally, the 2 limited term positions that we had that was given to us through the budget change proposal to address the business modernization project has expired. And so, as you may have noticed, Mr. Brueggemann is no longer with us, and he has promoted, and we are thankful for his service and for the attention to detail that he brought us for the legislation last year. Additionally, our policy coordinator, Christine Brothers, is out on maternity leave. And so we are exploring the option of a part-time position to address some of the legislative items in the coming year. That is all for the staffing update. Any questions from the board members on that?
I do. Thank you, Ben, for that. How are you managing everything with Mr. Brueggemann moving on and Ms. Brothers on maternity leave? Have you essentially just spread the work to other members or other staff, or are you kind of taking that on?
Yes, it's being spread between myself and the Essential Services Manager, Marissa Ochoa. And so we are addressing the legislation as it comes up, doing the searches for it and doing the analyses for it.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm. Any additional questions from board members? Hearing none, I'll go ahead and move on to the facilities update. We continue to be delayed in moving into our new spot. We are awaiting permits, and there was a redesign requiring the development of a second exit for emergency purposes. And so that's moving through the permitting process as we speak. The tentative move-in date is late June or July. So we are hopeful that we will be able to move into our new facility soon. That is all for the facilities update. Any questions from the members? Hearing none, we'll go ahead and move to the business modernization update. And I would like to introduce Mr. Jay Hurt to provide us the update. Mr. Hurt.
Thank you, Ben. And so for the business modernization update, the Acupuncture Board continues to work with our partners, the California Department of Technology, the Office of Information Services at DCA, and our Business Modernization Cohort 1 group partners, which are the Bureau of Private Post-Secondary Education, Chiropractic Board, and the Board of Professional Engineering, BPELS-G, along with us. And so that group allows us to exert a little bit of scale and giving more functionality to more groups, because one board alone would not be able to handle the bill with this. So we're moving along with that group, and we've been working together for a couple of years now. So we're a pretty well-knit group. And so in the last number of months, what we have done is we've been able to refine a bunch of existing functionality, including the renewal processes, the wall license processes, exam processes, and our license fulfilling printing issues that were impacted by the changes at the EDD department. So we've absorbed that and moved that forward. Currently, we've also been developing the continuing education module, and right now we're actively testing the continuing education provider modules, which will include both the ability for them to apply for initial approval as a provider and also renewal application as a provider, and then as well as course applications to be applied for and to approve, also with the ability to pay for all of that with credit cards. So that's the beginning part. The tentative go live for that is in early May, and but that's a pretty good date. We've actually in earlier meetings, Sean O'Connor from the chief of Office of Information Services did describe that the project was extended, for reasons, but was in budget, and so that's why we're at this place a little bit longer than we thought we would be at, just because the project was being extended. So then, following the development of the CE processes, we will be moving on to finding ways to bring in more of our business processes that can be applied for and paid for online, like things like name change or license verifications, those kind of processes, as well as we'll be moving on to developing the enforcement module next, which has already been fully developed for another board in our cohort. So we feel like we're going to have a really good head start on that moving forward with that development. And that's basically where the business modernization project stands at the moment. And that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hurt. Any questions from the board members?
I do. This was for those of us that just went through Senate confirmation. This was an item that Senate staff was fairly keen on learning more about, and I just want to make sure. And I know that staff has been kind of in contact via board members who are going through the questioning about just coordination process, making sure that we kind of learn from other modernization experiences for other departments, especially as to kind of the software and digital interface that we're looking to develop, and we are developing. And I just want to make sure that staff is keeping Senate staff and the various parties involved in that process, so that they know, especially from the technology side, what is being done and why it's different from what may have been done in other circumstances that didn't turn out as well as we would have hoped.
I can address that, Mr. President. Yes, the legislature is apprised of the board's actions. The business modernization project has a lot of dollars tied to it, and therefore there's budget change proposals required to keep the project going. And to be able to do those budget change proposals, they are reviewed by the department, by agency, and when requesting the additional money, it is discussed with legislative analysts as well as staff of the legislators. So we have traditionally held 1 to 2 meetings yearly to be able to provide this information. This is spearheaded by the Department of Consumer Affairs, Office of Information Services, where we see a number of our chiefs going, and as well as our executive officers of the member programs will attend or have attended to address any questions, as well as during the Appropriations Committee meetings to discuss the money on this. So there is a constant process of updating. They may not know the specifics of our program, which is sometimes why they reach out to us, especially in the confirmation process or the reconfirmation process. But there is an opportunity for the exchange of information and for updating.
Many thanks. Appreciate it.
Certainly. You're very welcome. Any additional questions from other board members? Hearing none, let's go ahead and move to the licensing report for quarter 2 of the fiscal year 2021 to 2022. And I will hand it off to Mr. Hurton, please.
Thank you again, Ben, and I'll proceed with giving the licensing report. So this licensing report is for Q2 fiscal year 2021-22. And if you turn to the list, we've added one more clarification in terms of the licensing status. So it's the status of clear. So what clear is any license that can be renewed. So it would involve the total of active, inactive, and delinquent licenses, because all those licenses could be renewed. So just a clarification on why that was added, just gives a little bit more clarity of what we're talking about. So for Q2, the total licenses that are able to be renewed were 1,231. Of those, 8,548 were active. There was 2,304 that were inactive, and then also 1,280 that were delinquent, and 89 canceled. And if you look at those last few, the active licenses have slightly decreased, and the inactive licenses, delinquent licenses, and canceled licenses have slightly increased. And I don't know how much of that is related to the pandemic or a trend or whatever, but we'll keep our eyes on those trends as they come about. For our initial license applications, we were able to approve 74 of them. Of those licenses, 0 were denied, but there is quite an extensive process. So by the time that they get through the process back and forth, they're set for approval. We just go endlessly. They either are deficient or approved. So that's why we're having very few denials. For AC license renewals, there was in Q2, there was 1,272. For wall, the total number of active wall licenses in Q2 was 2,007, which we're feeling is lagging a little bit behind. But again, this is a new program that's, licensees are required for this requirement at their next renewal post 1/1/21. So we're still bringing everybody on board, and so we're working on getting the word out and getting more compliance with that as well. Initial wall licenses for the quarter 2 was 600. And then the wall license renewals that we had were 14, which we're expecting those to really increase, and the initial ones to decrease after we get through this 2-year period of bringing this program online for our licensees. For continuing education report, in Q2 we received 14 new applications for providers. None of those were denied. In terms of course applications for continuing education, we received 565 in Q2. And of those 565, 562 were approved and 3 were denied. And then the total number of active providers right now are 436. So that number has been dropping slowly, but the main providers are actually putting a lot of courses out there. So we do feel like we have adequate number of coursework out there for our licensees to maintain their licensure as required. For education and training programs in quarter 2, applications for board approval of curriculum, we received 4. Of those 4 in that quarter, 1 was considered to be incomplete and goes back for a re-review. And then 5 were approved in quarter 2. And some of these, they have to go through a number of periods of re-review. So, even though you're not seeing as many as before, those were in some kind of a processes, back in the previous year and finally completed. It's quite a complex, detailed process. For acupuncture tutorial training programs, in Q2, we received 4 new applications. There was also 19 program approvals, 2 programs completed, and now we have a total of 55 active tutorial programs. And you'll see a big increase from the time before, but there's a couple of reasons. Some of these were slowed by the pandemic and have gained steam as things have lightened up. The other thing is we did have our education coordinator was out on maternity leave for a while, so there was a little bit of delay in processing, but now she's been able to catch up, and so we've just had a culmination of those, representing that increase. The other things is these are complicated applications that take a lot, and so some of them, they just matured in this quarter. And one of the trends we're really seeing is we're getting a lot of out-of-state applications, and because of the way their education works and the way that the accreditor works, it's hard for them to go back to school to complete the California requirements if they're missing Herbal or something along that line. Because if they go back to school, they have to complete 50% of their program at the school that's going to confer the degree. So that just turns out to be too big of a step if they've completed a program. So they have been entering in the tutorial program where they can get credit for their prior experience. But it is an interesting, they're using the tutorial route rather than the approved training program route just because of the difficulties with paying for the education. But it's working well. That's just an explanation of why we have so many of those in the recent times. So then moving on to our exam statistics, the KL statistics from the period 7/1/2021 to 12/31/2021. I'm just going to drill down to the bottom line, the grand totals on there. And for our first time test takers, we had 164 passes, 28 fails, which was a pass rate of 85%. And then if we look at the overall statistics of repeat and first-time takers, we had a total of 182 in this 6-month period, the Q1, Q2, and 64 of those were fails. So we ended up with an overall pass rate of 74%, which is considered to be a very healthy pass rate for a professional exam like this. So both OPS, the Office of Professional Exam Services, and the board staff are pleased with these statistics. It feels like the KL is performing well, but I do have to tip my hat to OPES, the Office of Exam Professional Services. They really work to bring in more subject matter experts, really freshen up the exam development, add new questions, and I think we got a really good team over there, and it's showing in the way that the exam's performing. So just a shout out to OPES. And then for our language statistics, if you're looking at the language statistics for this period, Q1, Q2 of 21-22, for Chinese, it was 76%. For English, it was 73%. And for Korean, it was 74%. So those are all relatively performing very similar with the overall pass rate of 74%. So again, even by language, we're very happy with the way those statistics have evened out and are kind of similar across the board. And when it comes to these statistics by language on our website, we haven't been updating our website just because of when we first went to computer-based testing, there was some questions about what was happening between the languages, and so we were holding back those statistics. But we're gonna, I'm gonna have staff go back in there and fill in those statistics by language. So, hopefully within the next month, we'll have them all the way through this period for everybody to review. And with that is the conclusion of the licensing report. Thank you, Ben.
Thank you kindly, Mr. Hurt. Board members, any questions on the information presented?
This is go ahead.
This is Yongbin Chen. Thank you, Ms. Herbal. I have a question. I looked the number of the licensing report from licensing status. So the active licensing from Q1, Q2 is above 8,000 numbers. And the active war licenses is only 1672 for Q1 and 2007 for Q2. Why there's a big difference of active licensing and active war licensing? Thank you.
I can answer that one. I did briefly touch on that on the report. The wall license requirement became active or was implemented as of 1/1/21, and that requirement is in the next renewal cycle. subsequent to 1/1/21 licensees were required to obtain a wall license. So many licensees haven't come up for that period. We're about halfway through that period of bringing them on. The other thing is many licensees have been pulling back from their practices and either doing telework or just pulling back from an active office right now due to the impact of the pandemic. So we're waiting for that to all sort out. But your overall observation is correct. We're seeing these numbers lagging behind, and we're going to. And it's really a whole new process for licensees. And my experience is licensees really only touch the board. Except for the few that come to our meeting at their renewal period, right? So they're just learning about it at that period. And so a number of them are just out of step with it and behind. So we will be working on, increasing compliance and getting out the word for the licensees to fulfill that requirement. So hopefully that's answers your question, Yongping.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Heather. So am I understanding right? So we give the licensee like a grace period for renew their initial war license. So I asked this question because I'm wondering, is there any possibility because the licensee, they don't get information to for the requirement of apply for war license. So when they renew their license, they did not realize they have to, or they don't know how to. So maybe some part of the licensees, they actually only renew the license, but not apply for the initial war license. Is that possibility exist? That's my question too.
Yes, it's true. I mean, we've done extensive messaging and phone staff, when there's ever questions about renewal, they do educate the licensees about what's required. And if you look in our homepage of our website under quick hits, there's information about the new wall license requirements and details. But again, like I'm saying, licensees don't really come to the board until they're renewing. And so this is not just with this issue, but in general, there's a fair amount of, I don't want to call it apathy, but we definitely need to not give up the remessaging of this requirement, right? So we're actually working on some more information, particularly with their license renewal, about adding some information on that, and we may even put some more stuff on our website. But I do think what you're thinking of is that people don't know about it, and or they think I've already got one because they have the older form of the engraved wall license that doesn't, have any end date or renewals or addresses on them. So, it's a lot of change for the licensees. We've never had it's a whole nother license type, and so I think our outreach is going to have to go on for quite a while to bring them into the fold. The other thing is they've just been very impacted by financially, right? So we're hearing that. Plus, with our fee increase and the wall license, it's been a challenge for a number of licensees, and we don't have any ways of waiving that. So there's a lot of factors working here. So.
Okay, thank you so much. So I have a third, same question, but same issue, but different question. So if the licensee does not renew the license, they have some fine, right? Financial fine. But if they just accidentally, they did not know or not intentionally not renew their active war license, will they get a fine? And how do we know they did not renew that the war license or apply for initial war license? How can we know that? Or is there any consequence for the war license not apply?
Well, in terms of consequences for the wall license, it's a fairly new requirement, right? And so right now, basically half the licensee population are not even required to do it. So our big thing right now is just doing outreach and bringing people onto it, onto the process with it. But if once they have a wall license, if they're late on it, there is a $25 late fee associated with not renewing the wall license or with not paying for it. And then the other one would be, eventually after this 2-year period, if they're not without their wall license, or if it's been past their renewal date and they don't have a wall license, they would be subjected to enforcement action, maybe some citation or something along that line. But again, I think the overall thing is right now, understanding this is a new process, it's a lot of change, and people have been really impacted by the change of the pandemic. So we will just keep really updating our efforts to get the word out and keep our eye on it.
Okay, thank you very much for your clarification. Thank you.
And Mr. Hurt, can you confirm we've updated the notices that do go out to our licensees when it comes time for renewal. It is a reminder as opposed to having a ticket, and it does encourage people to go online, and the online process does automatically address the wall license question. Is that correct?
That's correct.
So if licensees renew online, they are guided through it, on top of receiving a reminder, and on top of having received an all licensee letter at the beginning or just before 2021 started to apprise them of this new change. Any other questions from the board members?
This is my quick one. Is someone else speaking? Sorry. Francisco, go ahead.
Oh, okay. For the number of delinquent licensees, and then also, so do you have any information on regarding this delinquent licensees? Like, are they like overaged, or they're retiring? That's why they are in delinquent status, or they don't practice, or it's like financial reason. Is there any information on this?
We don't have any
information.
Go ahead. Okay, so what I was going to say is, in terms of delinquency, the acupuncture licensees as a population have run a high delinquency rate all along. And so right now the delinquency fee has gone up from $25 to $150. So there is a much greater financial incentive for them to keep their license current in terms of that stuff. But as a licensing manager and seeing it come through, they're subject to a number of things that they're not knowing that there's an increase, they're not tracking their license, they didn't know that there was a fee increase, or they can't pay and they're just managing it. And they've done that kind of historically, and then when they get to the date, it's kind of a shock for them. So then there's a scrabble to get it around and for them to come up with the money. I think just as a general population, our licensing population has really been hit financially, so it is impacting their renewals. Although the trending right now is people are coming back, people are buying their wall licenses, and the mood has definitely changed, at least from what we're hearing from our phones right now in terms of acupuncturists coming back to it. But I do think the overall thing is that we've run a high level of delinquency in the past, and licensees are learning when they renew that there's a big fee, in terms of being delinquent. So hopefully, as time goes by, that's enough to keep people more current in general.
Okay, thank you. And then one more thing is then, what about the numbers of those first-time taker? Do you have any increase in the first-time takers number? Do you see that, or is it declining?
In terms of in comparison to previous testing periods?
Oh no, I'm sorry. Examine first-time examine takers number. I see the initial license application, and then if some of them they take their the exam first time, then are those numbers all increasing, or is it kind of same?
I can take a stab at that. Once the pandemic hit, we had way less. There was a drop in people who were taking the exam, right? So there is a little bit of a built-up number of that. So we're having a slight increase of KL testing going on right now, in terms of that. The other thing to consider is that once you're qualified for the exam, like you've gone through that process, first, when people apply, they have 180 days to qualify. But once they've qualified, they have 2 years before they have to take the test. And so I think a number of the people moving through school were waiting, for a time just because they had the ability to do it. And with our computer-based testing, they can take it whenever, Monday through Saturday. So there's not like I got to do it at this one date or wait 6 months kind of a thing. So there's just a lot of factors, in terms of when they get their initial, applications come into their approvals. There's a bit of time with it, but overall, there's been a drop in that for sure moving forward. And in terms of your question about the 85% first-time test takers, that has dropped slightly. It's been pretty consistent for the last couple of reports that we've done. But again, the overall test number is a really good number for that. And, really, in working with our partners at OPS, they're very happy with these results. They're performing as they should be. That's what I have to say about that. Hopefully that answers all your questions.
Thank you. Thank you.
I'd like to add something to your first question, Member Kim. In regards to the delinquent status, we have not completed the regulatory package on the retirement status. That is in the works. So once that gets up there, we'll be able to delineate those who are retiring as opposed to those who are delinquent. Because as you had touched upon, those who are currently retiring often just let their license lapse because they're not practicing, therefore don't need to renew. So we may be able to get additional data. We will be able to get additional data after that regulation is implemented. But outside of that, as Jane noted, the previous late fee was only $25, so it did not provide much incentive, or it was an easier bite to swallow if you hadn't completed your continuing education, or as in the pandemic, didn't have were limited in your funding to be able to facilitate your license.
Yeah, thank you for your clarification.
Certainly. I heard comments from Dr. Mateki and President Herbal.
Yes. May I, President?
Absolutely, go ahead.
Yeah, so my question is regarding the continuing education courses, and thank you, Jay, for the wonderful presentation. And I can see the course application approved, the numbers increasing. This is maybe back to Beau also because of the staff shortage here with the board. How the CE monitor process. I know the sunset is coming up. That's one of the questions was brought up from the last sunset. So I'm just want to know is, do we have adequate staff on monitoring, especially now with the pandemic? There is a lot courses through distance learning provided. So I'm just want to know the monitoring process for the provider and for the applicants, for the licensees.
So in our CE department, Dr. Pateki, this is Jay Hurt speaking again. We are totally adequately staffed, and that unit is up to date with what's going on with applications. There was significant change to the process requiring a course fee, and particularly as of the end of the year, all providers were required to bring their distance courses in, which was many of them to do. So our staff has really been just nose down and really getting that done. So that's been, so we're not having a staffing problem, in terms of that stuff. In terms of the overall auditing process and what we're going to do, Ben and I have been discussing, particularly for Sunset, presenting for that. But during the pandemic and due to the governor's executive orders and allowing the director of the DCA to allow for waivers, all the healing arts board have been given waivers in terms of CE compliance, which have worked through right now. So we've actually halted our auditing process during the pandemic, but we have worked on the unit. I mean, we have the process in place to start up, we're looking what is a good time to start for that. But we'd like to have that, really functioning well and being able to present that at sunset hearing with, an adequate CE compliance process in place and functioning.
Wonderful. Thank you. My second question is about a tutoring training program. I think maybe I will just put it when we later on during the stakeholder agenda. So I maybe just wait for them to discuss it. Thank you, Mr. Hurd. And thank you, Mr. Baudia.
Certainly.
And my questions have been answered. So thank you. Thank you, Mr. Hurd. Thank you, Mr. Baudia.
Very welcome. Any additional questions, board members? Hearing none, we can turn to the enforcement report for Q2 of 2021-2022 fiscal year. In that quarter, we received 8 complaints for unprofessional conduct, as broken down there. 7 for unlicensed or unregistered practice. 2 on applicants, 8 on licensees. No sexual misconduct or fraud. 4 non-jurisdictional. 3 incompetence or negligence. 1 unsafe or unsanitary conditions, and 1 other. No substance abusing, drug and mental or physical impairment, nor discipline by another state agency, which brings our total to 34 complaints received in Q2. In the investigations, you can see where we initiated 34, with 204 still pending, and 34 were closed in the previous quarter as well. Moving to the performance measures, we see that total complaints received was 24. Oh, looks like we'll have to correct that. We did receive 34, not 24. Total received there, pardon. With the arrested and conviction is 34. Intake cycle time, we're at 7 days, and this was increased as we had a transition of our veteran enforcement analyst, we received a new enforcement analyst who's really taken to the task and dived in to figure out our systems without the veteran guidance. So we're actually updating a number of our manuals and streamlining our some new processes as well. And we've been working hand in hand with Division of Investigation to ensure that we are addressing the complaints and the processes appropriately. And it's been actually quite enlightening to have such a deep dive into the enforcement process. For performance measure 3, investigation cycle time, all investigations closed was 34, and average cycle time for investigation was 606 days. Percentage below reflects the number of investigation cases closed in the respective quarters, as you'll see there, as well as the average time frame to process citations that were closed within the respective quarter. Fine citations only took 1, whereas average day, we only had 1, with the average date to close is 436. PM4 cycle time for discipline. We had 1 case which took over 1,322 days. It was a case of a more complex nature, so it did take a little bit longer. And we see the stats for what's at the AG. 8 cases initiated, 22 pending, 2 accusations filed, 1 closed after transmission, 1 probation initiated. And then below that, we have the percentage of the number of cases assigned for discipline that closed in that quarter. We had 1, which was over 3 years old, which is why we see that figure up in the first part of PM4 at 1,322. Other legal actions, we did not have any Penal Code 23s or interim suspensions issued in that quarter. That brings us to the end of the enforcement report. Any questions from the board members?
This is Member Kim. Are those numbers looking better or looking same, or how do you see it?
Yeah, we're kind of stable at the time. I mean, it's nice to close the older cases, which does drive our averages up. And because we have fewer cases than, let's say, a board with a lot higher licensee populations, that does affect our averages. For us, we do kind of have to wait and see to get more numbers, to get a broader picture of how our times are. But it is encouraging to see the older cases closing. Did I address your question, Mr. Kim?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions from board members? Hearing none, I will go ahead and move on to the sunset report update. The board, oh, did I have a question?
Yes, this is a member Mateki.
Please.
Yeah, I just want to know that unlicensed, unregistered, the category there. So what does that mean? Is it just the people without a license, or
yeah, it represents that there was a complaint received by the board where the complainant is unclear or could not find proof that the individual was licensed, and or that the individual was providing acupuncture services in a non-acupuncture setting without the appropriate decals or like even the consumer notice to consumers that the acupuncturist is licensed. So sometimes this is people not being clear about what the scope of acupuncture is. So it can be someone that is doing cupping, which is not limited to just acupuncturists. Massage therapists can do cupping. And so it could be non-jurisdictional, but we do have that case as well. But most of the time it's because the individual has not been able to provide the complainant any proof of licensure.
Got it. Thank you for the clarification.
Certainly. And that does include other professions practicing acupuncture scope. So you might have athletic trainers or massage therapists that are doing dry needling, or PTs, or chiropractors. So there's that aspect as well.
Thank you.
Very welcome.
Hi, Mr. Padilla, can I ask a question?
Certainly, Mr. President.
So I'd like to know, you just say if other professionals or non-professional, just massage therapists, if they do dry needling, will they be complained, or are they also? I mean, acupuncture board only regulate or oversee acupuncturists, licensed acupuncturists, or other non-acupuncturists doing acupuncture is also in our jurisdiction? That's my question.
Yeah, so currently there are medical doctors, dentists, podiatrists that can do acupuncture within their scope with no issues. But outside of that, if we receive a complaint of someone with another license, what we do is we open the investigation, with another license, but doing something, as your example, like dry needling, that would be within the board's jurisdiction if it wasn't in the professions I just mentioned. And we would also reach out to the corresponding licensees board to advise of this and investigate.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Padilla. So I have a little question, just continue earlier my question. So unregistered, is that including unregistered war license, or war license not active? Is that included?
The unlicensed, no, if they didn't have the professional, if they didn't have their wall license, it would be unprofessional conduct for not keeping up with their requirements. I'll have to go back and check what unregistered was there. It does apply to the unlicensed, but in this case, it might be a vestigial word from previous times. Thank you for pointing that out. I will get back to you on that.
Thank you, Ms. Padilla.
Mm-hmm. Hearing no more questions from the board members, I'll move on to the Sunset Report update. We did begin working on the Sunset Report last summer, and then we were advised that the bill passed, allowing the board to be extended one more year. So we are now going to be working on continuing the Sunset Report this year, including this last fiscal year's, and it's about to end in June, data for the report. So we'll be reporting on 5 years. And my understanding is that the format is changing. However, we are researching based on the old format now, as a lot of the data will be similar, so we'll be able to transpose that, and then we'll see what adjustments have been made. Normally, what I've been hearing is that there's some questions addressing how the board has been addressing the COVID pandemic. So that will be further developed throughout the year, and the new template should be available to the board sometime in July. Any questions from the board members? Hearing none, I yield the floor to the president.
Thank you, Mr. Bodea. How is everyone doing in terms of stamina and needing a break? We're a little less than an hour in, and so we're about to go into the legislative report. And maybe Mr. Bodea, how long do you think the legislative report will take?
It may be wise just to briefly pause here, as that will be the biggest report that we will be providing, except for perhaps the last discussion item. And just allow us to move more fluidly through the rest.
Yeah, let's do that. Let's take a break here and then hopefully progress through the remainder of the agenda when we get back. So do we want to take 15 minutes?
Yes, please.
Great. Let's take a break.
Moderator.
We will be taking a break. Did you want to do public comment now for the EO report? Or shall we do a break and take a comment afterwards?
No, sorry, great point. Let's take public comment now. I apologize.
Perfect.
All right, fantastic. One moment, and we will go ahead and turn on the Q&A feature of WebEx to facilitate public comment. If you have a comment on the executive report, you can look for the apologies to the question mark in the box in the circle that is to the lower right corner of your WebEx screen, or behind the 3-dot other options if you're on a mobile device. Type the word comment into the text box and click send. And we have a request for comment from someone logged in as David Quackenbush. And David, I will send you a request to unmute, and then you will have 3 minutes to speak. And you are unmuted.
Good morning. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you. Just two quick clarifying questions going back to the licensing report, because it does seem that there is a decline of some kind in practitioners continuing to practice, and then also folks sitting for the exam. And we also hear from our school colleagues that there are, some decreases in enrollment. So I'm just trying to get a sense of the actual active practitioners. And on the report, it said there's around 8,500 active practitioners. My question is, folks who have WAL licenses still have to have an active license, correct? So technically there's around 8,500 active practicing acupuncturists. Is that accurate?
Yes, David, that's accurate. And but if you remember what I mentioned before, there's a 2-year period of coming on board. So be kind of using your kind of math, we would be expecting, you know, for the first year to have around, 4,200 wall licenses, something along that line. And then, and then again for the next year. So we're watching that. Although just I've had so much feedback where people have pulled back from their offices or waiting for kind of a clear of the pandemic to be able to purchase their wall license. So you do have to have an active you have to have a active or inactive license to be able to buy a wall license. It's a requirement. But if you're not practicing, if you're doing mobile acupuncture or you're only doing telework or you're on a pause of some sort, but you want to keep your license active, you could forego having the wall license until you were actually walking into that office and practicing. So there are a number of factors working here, but I think the trending is low for sure in general, and I think that trend will most likely continue for a little bit of time.
Great. So there's around 8,500 active practitioners. That's the number we should be looking at as far as the trend of folks coming in and out of the profession. My other question, probably for Ben, is I appreciate the update on the sunset internal process. Is there a way to engage with the staff on the sunset review process prior to the report being finalized and presented to the legislature?
Mr. President, we are in public comment. Would you like me to address this question?
Yeah, why don't we, I mean, the standard protocol, and Jay, don't worry about it. Why don't you finish your comment, pose your questions, and then we can have staff address when we're done with public comment. This really isn't a back and forth, so.
Okay, well, so okay, so you understood my question. Thank you for taking it.
And this is the moderator. I have no other requests for public comment at this time.
Great.
Shall
So,
I
Mr.
close
Bodea,
the
if you
Q&A?
want to address that question, we can close public comment, and then Mr. Bodea, if you want to address that question. Thank you.
Certainly. The sunset report is a very transparent process wherein we as staff and board members bring the sunset report drafts to board meetings to be reviewed by board members and the public, at which time the public is welcome to make comments on the report itself.
Okay.
Are we good to move? Okay.
Yeah, and Mr. Quackenbush, if you have any further questions, you can always just follow up in an email, and we can have offline discussions. But for now, we'll leave it there, and let's take that 15-minute break.
And this is the moderator. If our legal counsel, Fred Chanyu, would like to test his microphone. Okay, we're not hearing you. So we will be back from recess at 10:43.
Thank you, moderator.
Perfect.
Members, when you hear your name, please acknowledge that you are on the line. Harabidian?
Here.
Osorio?
I'm here.
Mateki? We'll come back to Mateki. Chen?
Yes.
Kim?
I'm here.
Lee?
I'm here.
And Mateki.
Yes, I'm here.
Welcome. Mr. President, we have quorum, and we may continue.
Are we still recording, or do we need to go back on record?
Good question,
We are
moderator.
still recording. Yes, we are still recording.
Great. Okay. Mr. Bodea, we'll turn it over to you for the legislative report.
Thank you, Mr. President. First item is the legislative calendar for 2022. And again, it's tentative. As you see, we have passed the last day to introduce bills, which was February 18th. And moving on to the bills of interest to the board, carried over from 2021. All of these bills are now dead and no longer active, so I'll just go ahead and read the number and the term, and if board members would like more information, please ask. Assembly Bill 2, Regulations, Legislative Review, and Regulatory Reform is dead. AB 29, State Bodies Cooper, is dead. AB 646, Department of Consumer Affairs Boards Expunge Convictions by Low, is dead. I'm sorry, it's amended on 1/24/22 in order to third reading beginning of January. And I'll go a little detail here since it's not dead. The bill would require boards and bureaus under the Department of Consumer Affairs to post information on their online license search system about a revoked license when the revocation is due to a criminal conviction, to update or remove information about the revoked license should the board receive an expungement order related conviction. Related to the conviction. This bill would authorize a board to charge a $25 fee to cover the reasonable regulatory cost of administering the bill's provisions, unless there is no associated cost. And the board position was watch. Assembly Bill 810, Healing Arts Reports, Claims Against Licensees by Flora, that was now dead. AB 885, Bagley Keene Open Meeting Act, Teleconferencing by Quirk, is failed to pass out of its House of Origin, so the bill is now considered dead. AB 918, Acupuncture Licensure Examination by Quirk Silva, is dead. Assembly Bill 1026, Business Licenses Veterans by Smith, failed to pass out of its House of Origin, so is now dead. Assembly Bill 1236, Healing Arts Licensees Data Collection, is considered dead and on the inactive file. AB 1386, License Fees and for Military Partners and Spouses by Cunningham, also is dead. AB 1468, Prior Authorization by Cunningham, is dead. And SB 731, Criminal Records Relief by Durazo, is Assembly motion to reconsider is continued. And the board's position is watch. Senate Bill 772, Professions and Vocations, Citations and Minor Violations by Ochoa Beau. Bill is considered dead. AB 1604, the Upward Mobility Act of 2022, Boards and Commissions, Civil Service Examinations and Classifications by Holden. This bill was introduced on February 23rd in this year, and existing law provides that the policy of the state of California that the composition of state boards and commissions shall be broadly reflective of the general public, including ethnic minorities and women. Summary of the bill. The relevant part of the bill affecting the board would require that on or after January 1st of 2023, all state boards and commissions consisting of one or more volunteer members have at least one board member or commissioner from an underrepresented community. The bill would define the term board member or commissioner from an underrepresented community as an individual who self-identifies as Black, African American, Hispanic, Latino, Asian, Pacific Islander, Native American, Native Hawaiian, or Alaska Native, who self-identifies as gay, lesbian, bisexual, or transgender, who is a veteran, or who has a disability. The bill would apply these requirements only as vacancies on state boards and commissions occur. This has no impact on the board, as board membership typically includes at least one member of an underrepresented group as identified in the bill. Staff sees no impact from this legislation, as well as no fiscal impact. Staff does not have a position, as board membership typically includes that, and we meet this requirement. Any questions for this item?
Board members, any questions?
No.
Hearing none. I'll move to Assembly Bill 16. I'm sorry?
I said okay.
Oh, thank you, Mr. President. Assembly Bill 1662, Licensing Boards, Disqualification from Licensure, Criminal Conviction by Gibson. This was introduced on January 18th of 2022. Existing law authorizes a board to deny, suspend, or revoke a license on the grounds that the applicant or licensee has been subject to formal discipline within the last 7 years from the date of application based on professional misconduct that would have been cause for discipline before the board for which the present application is made, and that is substantially related to the qualifications, functions, or duties of the business or profession for which the present application is made. It does authorize a board to deny, suspend, or revoke a license on the grounds that the applicant or licensee has been convicted of a crime substantially related to the qualifications, functions, or duties of business or profession within the last 7 years from which the application is being made. This bill would amend the law to authorize a prospective applicant that has been convicted of a crime to submit to a board a request for a pre-application determination that includes information provided by the prospective applicant regarding their criminal conviction. This would also amend the law to require a board that receives that request to determine if the prospective applicant would be disqualified from licensure by the board based on the information submitted with the request, and deliver that determination to the prospective applicant. Now, the board impact under the current law, the board shall not require applicants to disclose any information or documentation regarding the applicant's criminal history. Therefore, there's not a question regarding an applicant's criminal history on the board's application for licensure. The board is only authorized to request mitigating information from an applicant regarding the applicant's criminal history for the purposes of determining substantial relation or demonstrating evidence of rehabilitation on a voluntary basis. The board currently relies upon live scan results after a mandatory fingerprint background check of all applicants to determine which applicants have a criminal conviction within the last 7 years to investigate further. This change in law from July 1st of 2020 has greatly reduced the volume of applicant criminal history cases that enforcement reviews. Below is a table showing the volume of applicant convictions received, the volume of applicants approved for licensure, and the volume of applicants denied for the last 3 fiscal years. You'll note for fiscal year 18-19, we received 33 applications with convictions, 27 applications with conviction approved for licensure, application with convictions denied was 0. For 1920, it was 27, 21, and none denied. And for 2021 fiscal year, it was 11 applicants with convictions received, 8 applications with convictions approved for licensure, and 0 applications with convictions denied. There has been interest expressed by applicants in the past wanting to know upfront, sometimes prior to enrolling in an acupuncture training program, if their criminal history will be a barrier to licensure when they become eligible. It is anticipated that the proposed provisions of AB 1662 will be well received by prospective applicants of an acupuncture license. The proposed legislation does not make it clear if the board may also request applicants who make these pre-application determination requests to voluntarily submit to fingerprinting prior to applying, so the information issued by DOJ and FBI are also available to the board. Otherwise, if the pre-application determination is authorized to be based solely on what the applicant provides, then the determination issued by the board cannot be determined as final until the applicant submits to fingerprinting with the board. Although applicants receive a determination from the board regarding their criminal history ahead of time will be beneficial to the applicants, the legislation may not provide full benefit if the board's decision is not final and based upon their criminal offender record information report. It is anticipated that the provisions of this bill will add additional staff time and resources for the review of any pre-application determination request. There is no guarantee that the prospective applicant submitting a request will in fact follow through and apply for licensure eventually. Therefore, this may result in a waste of staff time and resources. In addition, the bill does not mention the request process authorizes the board to collect a fee, so the time spent on this process and service to the applicant is essentially provided for free. The legislation also does not take into account convictions that may occur in the interim of receiving the board's decision on the applicant's pre-application determination request and applying for licensure. If a subsequent conviction occurs, then there will need to be additional time for the review of the applicant's criminal history, rendering the first determination invalid. In addition, if the board cannot use the applicant's official CORI, or Criminal Offender Record Information Report, during the pre-application determination request process, then possibly an additional review will need to occur when the applicant applies with fingerprints and their CORI is received. The benefit to the applicant is apparent in that they will have the board's determination regarding their criminal history up front, which may result in cost savings to the applicant if investments in education can be avoided knowing that they won't be eligible for licensure. However, the added benefit to public protection or improving boards' processes or managing expenditures does not appear to be achieved. The fiscal impact is anticipated that the volume of the pre-application determination requests under the provisions of this bill would be similar to previous year's volume of applicant investigations prior to July 1st of 2020. When the board initiated cases based on applicants' self-disclosure in addition to query, the volume is also expected to be slightly higher with the assumption that prospective applicants not yet eligible for licensure or enrolled in an acupuncture training program will also use this pathway in determining their education and career choice. The volume is estimated to be between 35 and 50 pre-application determination requests annually. It currently takes enforcement staff at the AGPA, or Associate Governmental Program Analyst level, to complete an applicant investigation within 10 hours. This means the provisions of this bill may amount to 350 to 500 hours of AGPA time split between two enforcement staff. Then there is also review time for the executive officer in making the final determination regarding a prospective applicant's qualification for licensure. This amounts to an hour per case, so a total of 35 to 50 hours of the executive officer's time. Based on last year's volume of applicant investigations, AGPA time amounted to 110 hours. This means AB 1662 could increase an AGPA's time spent on applicant investigations by 355%. It is also estimated that the board will require regulations to further implement the request and review process, as well as standardize the information/documentation required for these requests. The entire rulemaking process on one package can take approximately 40 hours of AGPA time annually. There will also be IT implementation costs associated with updating the board's IT system to capture the new pre-application determination process electronically. Our staff recommendation is watch. And although that was quite lengthy, it does present a challenge in what can change in the intervening years. Keep in mind that applicants can request this prior to beginning even training. Any questions or comments from the board?
I do, and thanks for that information, very helpful. So at this point, there was a change in the law in, I believe, July 1st, 2020, where applicants no longer disclose criminal history. Is that correct?
That is correct.
So we're just relying on the live scan, and as the report says, that has greatly reduced staff's kind of review of criminal background reports or history, but also means it seems like it's implying we just have a lot less clarity unless it's being picked up on a live scan. And I assume the live scan doesn't necessarily pick up everything on whether a potential licensee and applicant has a criminal history in the past 7 years. Is that a fair assumption, or do we feel like we're getting all the information we would have received anyway with the applicant disclosing?
So most criminal convictions are found on the live scan reporting, and it's coming from the Department of Justice as well as the FBI. But you are right. Unless we have that live scan for these pre-applicants, we really will have a challenge determining them, because what this does is it allows the applicant to volunteer what their status is or what their convictions are. And that can be what their situation really is, or it may not actually mirror that. So the board isn't working with any firm data other than what is being reported, what is being volunteered by the applicant. Got it.
Okay. And as of now, we don't, if anyone wants a pre-assessment, we don't allow that. We don't give that opportunity, and nor does any other kind of medical board.
Not that I'm aware of. We don't, and I'm not aware of other boards doing this. It would be challenging as this could be seen as a contract or a commitment,
right.
And that would bind the board years before the applicant even applies.
Yeah, and I guess based on the staff write-up, I'm just wondering if we want to go to an oppose rather than a watch. And I think as long as we feel like we're protecting the public with our live scan, as long as we feel like we are getting sufficient information from live scan, the only thing about the bill that seemed, I think, intriguing, positive for us as a board with an eye towards protecting the patient is, the voluntary nature of producing information based on criminal history in the last 7 years. But if we're confident the live scan is getting that, then it just seems like this bill is a negative on on kind of everyone involved except for the applicant. And we aren't, although it benefits the applicant, that's not our job here. I mean, our job is really to focus on the public. So I'm fine keeping it as a watch. I guess, is there a reason why staff doesn't think we should be in oppose?
Staff tends to remain somewhat neutral when it comes to the more recent direction to work with the criminal conviction item. Initially, the board was opposed to the 7-year, the bill that instituted this, not considering anything in the last 7 years unless it was incredibly egregious and unprofessional. But yeah, this does prevent some challenges, indeed. But we leave it to the board, just so that the board can take a stance in this one, should it wish so.
Is there also a concern about just coming out? We don't oppose many bills, and part of that may be just general relations between the board and the legislature as well. So I'm cognizant of that. So look, I'm fine keeping it as watch in light of all that.
We feel that there needs a bit more information addressing like some of the board's concerns or some of the staff concerns regarding this, and we may get amendments to this that might clarify how this is done. If there's a cost associated with this, again, that is a big challenge that staff would be working on, something that isn't necessarily binding, but could be binding, and it's at one point in time. So yeah, we're hoping that this is elaborated on further.
Got it. Okay, that's helpful. Thank you.
Any other questions from board members, or may I move on, Mr. President?
I'm not seeing any hands from board members, but go ahead. Dr. Matecki, is that you?
Yes, it's me. Sorry,
Go ahead.
didn't raise the hand. No, I agree with you, Mr. President. I think it's right now. It's I support watch and to see how this move forward.
Great. I appreciate that, and yeah, it seems like the right way to go.
Excellent. We'll keep that as watch, and we'll see what changes happen before the June 16th and 17th board meeting.
Right.
Assembling Bill 1733, State Bodies, Open Meetings, introduced on January 31st of this year. Existing law of the Bagley-Keene Open Meeting Act requires, with specified exceptions, that all meetings of a state body be open and public, and all persons be permitted to attend any meeting of a state body. AB 1733 would specify that a meeting held under the Bagley-Keene Open Meeting Act includes a meeting held entirely by teleconference, as defined, so long as the state body adheres to certain specified requirements, such as ensuring the public has the means to hear, observe, and address the state body during the meeting, providing the public with at least one physical location where they can participate, posting the meeting agendas online and at the physical meeting location with information indicating how the meeting can be accessed, and ensuring that if a means of remote participation fails, the meeting must adjourn. If passed, the board would be able to hold open and closed meeting by teleconference as specified. The board would see a decrease in staff time for travel arrangements, but would see an increase in staff time for the arrangements of web teleconference, webcast functionality, and ensuring a physical location that is open to the public to participate. The bill currently does not specify region requirements for the bill. For cost efficiencies, the board's goal for the required physical location would be to utilize the hearing room at the department's headquarters. In terms of fiscal impact, the board typically spends about $10,000 for in-person meetings and $2,000 to hold a remote meeting for 4 to 5 times a year. This would result in cost savings to the board of $8,000 by reducing cost for travel, hotel, room reservations, and the bill does not clarify if physical locations need to be held in a specific region, so this was not factored into the costs. For cost efficiencies, the goal for the required physical location is the hearing room at the department's headquarters to be utilized. Staff recommendation is watch, although after this was drafted, I do recommend a support position. It would facilitate board members to log in remotely as long as we had a physical location for the public to also join in on. Should they not be able to travel, we will also, as noted, receive cost savings for lodging and travel and working with department resources for physical locations.
Yeah, I agree. That was going to be my question / comment, which is, it seems like this is one that we would want to support given the financial impact. Financial impact on the board and everything else. So I would be inclined, subject to hearing from other board members, to support this.
Indeed, and it would also open it up to the public. The public would be able to save money and not have to travel as well. They'd be able to sit in remotely. Members?
Yes, this is Mateki. I would say I support on this is I think it's convenient for the public stakeholder, especially decrease their traveling. Many of them have a very, very busy schedule. I would say definitely I support for this. And of course, with the board, if it's the cost effective, you look at no-brainer, will support for the board also. So my vote, I think I would like to change it to support, but let's see what other board member on this.
And Mr. President, if I may add, nothing would prevent board members from traveling to the physical location should they wish to attend physically the meeting.
Yeah, right. Well, that's good to know.
This is Yongping Chen. May I speak, President Halvidian?
Oh, absolutely. Go ahead.
Thank you. So thanks to the modern technology, and we were able to do this. So the last 2 years, we don't see any disadvantage of the online meeting. So for the future, for the convenience for our stakeholders, and not this meeting, but the agenda kind of simple, but in the most meeting the past 2 years, we saw the increased number of stakeholders participation than in-person meeting overall, right? So I think there's a lot of positive point for the online meeting. So I support. Thank you.
Any other board members?
No.
Okay. Well, does someone want to make a motion as to that change from a watch to a support on AB 1733? And then we'll open up for public comment.
I can certainly move, Mr. President.
Please, thank you.
I second Yongping Chen.
Do we need to spell out?
I think staff probably hopefully encapsulated the motion, but if not, staff can clarify.
Certainly, the motion on the table is to support AB 1733 due to increased access to the public and reduced costs on the board. We are ready to open it for public comment. Apologies, motioned by Amy Mateki, seconded by Yongping Chen.
Thank you.
And this is the moderator, and we've opened up the Q&A feature of WebEx to facilitate public comment. If you'd like to comment on the motion for supporting AB 1733, you can look for the question mark icon, and then in the text box, type the word comment and click send. If you're on a mobile device, the Q&A is behind the 3 other options. And if you are a call-in user, you can use *3 to raise your hand. Each commenter will have 3 minutes to speak. And I do not see any requests for public comment. Shall I close the Q&A feature?
Please, thank you.
You're welcome.
Great. So now we'll take a roll call vote on AB 1733.
Excellent. Members, when you hear your name, please let me know if you are in support of the motion to support AB 1733. Harabidian?
Yes.
Osorio?
Yes.
Mateki?
Yes.
Chen?
Yes.
Kim?
Yes.
Lee?
Yes.
Motion passes. The board now supports AB 1733, and we will issue a support letter after the meeting. Moving on to Senate Bill 1031, Healing Arts Boards, Inactive License Fees by Ochoa Beau, introduced February 15th of this year. Existing law requires each healing arts board to issue inactive licenses to holders of active licenses whose license is not punitively restricted by that board. It prohibits the holder of an inactive license from engaging in any activity for which an active license is required, and requires the renewal fee for an active license to apply to an inactive license, unless the board establishes a lower fee. This bill requires the renewal fee for an inactive license to be half of the amount of the fee for a renewal of an active license, unless the board establishes a lower fee. How this will impact the board: under current law, the board charges the same dollar amount, which is $500 after our fee raises, for both active and inactive licenses. The board would be prohibited from charging the $500 to inactive licensees and instead would be required to charge $250, which is half of the renewal fee. Staff will be required to update the active/inactive license application, but the workload to process the inactive licenses is estimated to remain the same. There will be IT implementation costs associated with updating the board's IT system to capture the new inactive fee to process the applications electronically. The fiscal impact to the board: on average, the board has about 2,206 inactive licensees that pay for an inactive fee biannually or until they place their license back on active status. Reducing the inactive fee from $500 to $250 would create an annual revenue decrease of about $275,750 to the board's fund. Staff's recommendation here is to oppose, as this bill creates a significant decrease in revenue and significantly impacts the board's fund condition without creating a decrease in the board's workload. Any questions from the board?
No. Do you need an oppose? Sorry, just to be clear, do you need a motion to oppose, or did we already have an oppose on record?
This is new. We would need to have a motion to oppose.
Okay.
And one other thing to keep in mind, if I might add, should this pass, that deficit in revenue would have to be accommodated by a fee change somewhere else. So it may require raising the licensing fee, the renewal fee, which would then also affect the inactive fee as well. So there would be some adjustment to the current fees to address the drop in revenue. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Ben. Board members, I will entertain some comments if you'd like, or just a motion kind of pursuant to the recommended opposition stance.
This is Member Yongping Chen. May I speak?
Go ahead, please.
Thank you. So the fee, the license fee and the renewal fee, inactive fee, active or inactive fee, all the fee based on the research and what's the cost of boards, workload, and the cost. I think that's the base to calculate what the charge. So the inactive, this bill does not decrease the board workload, but decrease the revenue. So it will be not balanced. So therefore, I agree, oppose this bill. Thank you.
Thank you. Do you want to make a motion on that?
Okay, I make a motion to Oppose this bill.
Thank you. Do I have a second?
I second that.
Thank you, Ruben. So we have a motion from Chen, second from Asario. Any other comments from the board before we go to public comment? Okay, hearing none, we can open it up for public comment.
And this is the moderator. We've opened up WebEx's Q&A feature to accommodate public comment. If you've got a comment on the motion concerning SB 1031, you can look for the question mark icon, typically in the lower right corner of your computer screen or behind the 3-dot other options if you're on a mobile device. Type the word comment in the text box and click send. Each commenter will have 3 minutes to speak. And I do not see any requests for public comment. Shall I close that public comment feature?
Yes, please.
Thank you.
Thank you, members. We have a motion to oppose SB 1031 by Dr. Matecki, by Dr. Chen, seconded by Mr. Osorio. Board members, when you hear your name, please let me know your decision. Mr. Herbal.
Yes.
Osorio?
Yes.
Matecki?
Yes.
Chen?
Yes.
Kim?
Yes.
Lee?
Yes.
Motion passes. The board opposes SB 1031, and we will issue an opposed letter after the board meeting. Thank you. Board President, that concludes the items for legislative review.
Great. Do we want, and Mr. Beau and Fred, do we need to open up for public comment just generally? Just in case someone had a comment that didn't necessarily apply to the bills that we had opened it up for specific action on?
Yeah, sure, Mr. President. It's never a bad idea to give more public comments.
Okay, let's do that. Thank you, Fred.
And this is the moderator. So we have opened up the Q&A feature of WebEx to facilitate public comment on any of the regulations covered in Agenda Item 5. If you have any comments on any of those, you can use the Q&A feature click on the question mark icon, and then in the text box, type the word comment and click send. Another option is to raise your hand. And if you are on a dial-in connection, you can use *3 to raise your hand. And I do not see any requests for public comment at this time. Shall I close that feature?
Yes, please.
Thank you.
And we'll move on to item number 6, regulations update.
Excellent. Thank you. The first document in the regulation update is the board's 2022 rulemaking calendar. That is the document we have submitted. And if you move to the second document, it'll show more detail. And what I'll do is I'll read the regulatory package and its current status. First item is fee waivers for licensure of military spouses and partners and application for licensure based on Title 16, California Code of Regulations 1399.413.419, and a new section to be created in the 1399 chapter. It is currently being researched and developed as of December of 21. Second package, temporary licensure of military spouses and partners, Title 16, California Code of Regulations 1399.413 and 419. This is also, as of December, under research and development by staff. Third package, California Code of Regulations 1399.400 through 489.1 is inclusive. Is Section 100 cleanup of the text and forms. primarily doing just cleanup throughout the text, but also changing the little b to big B as the board is referred to in statute. And this was completed in October of 2021. Item 4, Division 13.7. I'm sorry, back to the third item. It was completed, staff and legal counsel have drafted the package, and we are waiting submission to OAL. Fourth package, Division 13.7, Article 6.1 and 6.2, Title 16, California Code of Regulations, Section 1399.469, addressing Senate Bill 1441, implementing uniform standards related to substance abusing licensees and updating of the disciplinary guidelines. It's still under development with staff and legal counsel, and we hope to bring you this later on this year. Package 5, disclosure of probation status to patients, attached to Senate Bill 1448, is still currently, the board has approved language and it is with staff and legal counsel for drafting. Item 6, Article 3.5, aligning curriculum standards and approval of related regulations with the statute. The board has approved language in 2019 as well as in March of 21 with updates, and it is with staff and legal counsel for drafting as of January 2021. Item 7, I'll just go ahead and read the subtitle as opposed to all the codes. Application process for licensing examination and re-examination and criteria and procedures for approval of Credential evaluation service. This was tied to AB 2190. The board approved the language in August of 2021 and staff is working on it. Package 8, application for retired status, as discussed earlier, retired status and restoration. Board approved language in 2019 and staff have been working with legal counsel on this package since January of 21. Continuing education requirements. Board approved language in March of 2021, and it's with staff for development as well as with legal. And item 10, standards of practice for telehealth services, was board approved language in March of 21, and staff has been working on that language. And the last item is the hand hygiene requirements, and board approved language for this back in 2014, and has been working on it since then. However, things have been, it has been set aside for higher priority regulations and is still under review with the regulatory unit. Are there any questions from the board members regarding the regulation packages we have in effect now, or we are working on now?
I don't think so.
Yeah. We are welcome to open up to public comment, should you wish, Mr. President.
Please.
And this is the moderator, and we are using the WebEx Q&A feature to facilitate public comment. If you'd like to make a comment on the regulations update, you can look for the question mark icon, typically in the lower right of your WebEx screen. And once you hit that, you'll see a text box. You can put the word comment into the text box and click send. The Q&A feature is behind the 3-dot other options if you are using a mobile device. And if you are a dial-in user, you can use *3 to raise your hand to make a comment. Each commenter will have 3 minutes to speak. And I do not see any requests for public comment. Shall I close that feature?
Yes, thank you.
You're welcome.
And no action required from us. Correct?
That is correct, Mr. President.
Great, thank you. Well, let's move on to item number 7.
Certainly. Item number 7 is discussion of proposed stakeholder meeting on acupuncture curriculum requirements. As is part of the board's strategic plan, it has an item to review its current educational curriculum requirements. And at the previous meeting, the board motioned to hold a stakeholder meeting, and I am here to provide you some updates. We are partnering with Department of Consumer Affairs Solid Office to conduct a stakeholder meeting on May 20th with the simple question of what modifications to the currently approved California acupuncture curriculum requirements would people recommend and why. We are drafting a notification to be sent to all licensees as well as the stakeholder list electronically so that we can get input on this from our stakeholders. So the refined question, which is still very simple, will be issued shortly with that notice, and we'll be looking for responses from the public. Are there any questions from board members?
So when's the, thanks for that. When is the kind of target date, do we think, on when we would get that meeting agendized?
Right now, we have reserved May 20th with the Solid offices to have that. Board members aren't required to attend, but they can, of course, and observe. We recommend that they're not making any decisions, otherwise we would have to abide by the Bagley-Keene Open Meeting Act, but they are allowed to attend. So May 20th for calls to this, and people would be able to submit documentation, but then also present at the stakeholder meeting as well. So we'll receive either written or oral testimony. However, with the oral testimony, it would be appreciated to have some report to back up that information.
Great. And that will be virtual, not in person?
Correct. Thank you. That's a great question. That will be virtual to facilitate greater participation. And it worked. We did work with Solid a couple of years ago to do a stakeholder meeting on the changes to the curriculum approval process. And so we feel that we'll be well served by Solid's assistance with this one as well.
That's great. I do see, I have one more question, then we'll go to Dr. Matecki. When we had talked about this, I think we had, when we were talking about stakeholders, you know, some in mind, but what groups are we going to reach out to, and how do you foresee us doing that? Electronically, through postings, virtual, virtual communication, mail? What do we kind of foresee as being the process for that?
Yeah, we would be
Dr.
using.
Matecki, you can go after that. Sorry, go ahead.
Not a problem. We would be using email notifications as we currently do for our board meetings and for any changes to processes. So we would be emailing the voluntarily applied for stakeholder list, as well as all our licensees, as we would appreciate their input, as they've been in practice for some time now and have a unique perspective on this, as well as the educators. Most of the schools are on our stakeholder list, but we would also, to be more precise, be including all the schools that are approved by us. And we can even reach out to the CCAHM, which is the coalition of all the acupuncture schools in the United States, as some of those schools that aren't approved by the board may be interested in applying for board curriculum approval. But it would be all electronic.
Thank you. Dr. Matecki, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Mr. Bodia. So I have a question here regarding the curriculum earlier mentioned on the tutorial students there. One is, I know we have an increased number from other states, but also in the past we discussed on that. So is this the proper venue to discuss for the tutorial students regarding the entry requirements or how the standard, because I know with acupuncture students in the schools that there are requirements for entry levels. Is this appropriate venue in this stakeholder meeting to discuss about the tutoring? Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Matecki. Mr. President, may I respond?
Absolutely.
Yes, this is Actually, that's an excellent suggestion, as this is regarding acupuncture curriculum requirements, and the board does have two different curriculum educational requirements. One is for approved training programs, and the other one is for the tutorial. So in reviewing the board's current requirements, it would behoove the board to review both of those. I would recommend that the board have a tutorial curriculum stakeholder meeting on a separate day, just to not mix those items out, and we can look to have it shortly thereafter. And I think it is warranted. Thank you for bringing that specificity.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments?
If the board is not opposed, we will, staff can go ahead and initiate having that second stakeholder session for the tutorial curriculum.
I think that sounds like a good idea.
So noted. We'll do so. Thank you.
Can we have public comments on this before we proceed?
Sure. Yeah, we will open this up for public comment.
Thank you.
And hear from hopefully some stakeholders.
And this is the moderator, and we've opened up the Q&A feature of WebEx for public comment. If you have comment about the stakeholder meeting, you can look for the question mark icon, typically in the lower right corner of your computer screen, or behind the 3-dot other options if you're on a mobile device. And then you can put the word comment into the text box and click send. And we have a request for comment from someone logged in as Neil Miller. Neil, I will send you a request to unmute your microphone, and you will have 3 minutes to speak. And you are unmuted.
Hello.
Hi.
Okay, my name is Neil Miller. I'm representing Cal APMA. My comments are this. I applaud the board for listening to the stakeholders who've been coming to the meetings and making this request. But the board keeps changing over. So this question has been coming up since the early 1990s when we went to the Little Hoover Commission, and the school said that we didn't have to be doctors and that we weren't doctors. And once that legislation went through, all those schools opened up doctoral programs. I'm not talking about the doctoral program, but I wanted to point out to the board that there's a wealth of information, because the acupuncture board had curriculum competency task force, and they had educational requirement task force. And after a year and a half of, they came out with a final paper. What this board came up with in the mid-90s hasn't changed. So I think it's imperative that the board pay attention to past documents that are already there, that were analyzed by the schools and the practitioners who are participating. And to follow up on Mr. Harabedian, who are we going to reach out to? So the board doesn't really reach out to very many acupuncturists unless you're on their list, and all the schools are on their list, and they're all paid to come to these meetings. And there's more of an agenda there, as opposed to the profession, who is really talking about what we need in terms of real world education. And if you look at the occupational analysis, the statistics showing that 25% of the people who participated felt that the education was not enough to be successful in practice or to be an integrated practitioner. And I'd also like to point out that the other 75%, or a big percentage of those people, don't know that they need more education because they haven't been exposed to the high level of education that is available, that you see within the Asian community, that the Asian community and those who are at a higher level of practice are participating in and taking CEs year after year after year. And a lot of that stuff should be core education component to have a new level of minimal level of competence. And what's changed since the 1990s is completely different today. So I will do my best to provide some of those documents because I have all of them. And I'll work with Ben to see what documents they have and what documents I could get to help the board or those who are participating have a better understanding of what's taken place before, so we don't try to reinvent the wheel. Because this has already been done. We did a real scientific study on what needed to be done, and it hasn't changed in 30 years.
And I see no further requests for comment. Shall I close the Q&A feature?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
And I appreciate that comment from Mr. Miller, and just want to make sure that I guess I just don't know I don't know the history as well, but you know, I think what we're doing here with the stakeholder meeting, we definitely want to make sure we're getting as many people there involved and participate as possible. But then secondly, I guess to the point about we've done this before and historically this has kind of already been done. I just want to make sure I understand, you know, what has been done. This seems to be a little different, I think. I mean, there is some overlap, but I thought that this is going to be, you know, pretty focused on the curriculum and kind of the test itself. But I just want to make sure that staff kind of understands what Mr. Miller was referring to. And if so, you know, feel free to comment and just opine on what was just said.
Yeah, some of what Mr. Miller was referring to is the Little Hoover Commission report back in the early aughts on the curriculum when it was looking to be changed from roughly 1,900 hours, which ended up being 3,000, and there was discussion of it being 4,000 or less. We would definitely be, we have the Little Hoover Commission report, I believe, posted on our website. If not, we can definitely have that link added to our publications for our stakeholders to review for this stakeholder meeting. And we do have that report in-house, so we would be looking at that too, and be able to provide it to the board members as well.
Great.
This is Member Kim. I think the discussion on the curriculum review. Yes, we need to pay a visit back to those Hoover Commission report and all that. But it's been 30 years. Things have changed, have been changed, and there's a new generation and new market standard, demand, and requirements. So we should listen to not to just this Hoover Commission report, but also from all the stakeholders. So yeah, it's very important to reach out to every single party in what's involved.
Thank you, Francisco. Any other, and I agree with you completely. Any other questions or comments before we wrap this item up?
Cases member Yongping Chen.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. President. So for what I view about the curriculum, competency, degree, education degree, master degree, doctor degree, what I think is most important to protect the consumer, protect the public by providing them safe and competent, decent, high-level service. This is our mission, right? Protect the consumer by provide them not only safe, but also quality service. So talking about the curriculum, I think curriculum, doctor degree, master degree is different thing. The degree, we have to go the stakeholder, not the board to initiate, right? But the stakeholder through legislation. But the curriculum we can review, and we will see if the curriculum meet the minimum requirement of competency. So the competency, I think, is very necessary for us to review the competency, because the competency means when the student graduate and pass the examination and get a license, they should be able to practice confidently compared with other professions like MDs and chiropractor, physical therapist. So this is, I think we should focus on, is the curriculum help the student prepare for their competency? And what is the competency, the standard of competency? Maybe we should look at this, the standard of competency too. Of course, including class education and the clinical training. So I hope the stakeholder, we reach the stakeholder and as many as possible, and the stakeholder, schools, educators, they can even some patient, maybe as many as possible feedback, and to help us to look the review the curriculum and associated with the competency. Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Mateki, you have your hand up.
Yes, thank you, Mr. President. So, Ms. Boudia, I have another question, with this stakeholder meeting. Not sure if it's appropriate to bring this up. Currently, I know this is in the past that we've been discussed, my patients and also my colleagues. It's very confused with the titles. There are so many abbreviations in the Chinese medicine or acupuncturists, just the titles like DTCM, DACM, DAOM. So all those names, I am not sure is this the appropriate time to discuss, but I thought with the curriculum, maybe there's some unanimously names come out. It's easier for the public because sometimes patients do ask me, who should I go, So is this appropriate time for that stakeholder meeting to bring those kind of information up? The part who's involved on that education or the licensees, stakeholders. So I just want to bring this up. Maybe there's need another stakeholder meeting.
Thank you, Dr. Mateki, for your question. We could look into that. Definitely, the board doesn't deal with the degrees. It's just those curriculum hour requirements that we have so far. But I imagine if stakeholders are going to provide updates to the curriculum, that they will show us where in the educational program their proposed curriculum will be. So whether or not that level of education will be at the master's level or the doctorate level would be dependent on the proposer. But we could ask as an addendum for the degree title. I would recommend against it, as we really just want to focus on the curriculum, which is what we do have oversight over. The Accreditation Commission for Acupuncture and Herbal Medicine, they were ACOM, now they're ACAHM due to the name change. They're technically responsible for the degrees. And we did have them attend one of our board meetings to discuss this. I believe it was this item that they discussed, the degree titles. And if not, we've definitely reviewed that at more recent committee meetings. And there has been some changes in the last 5 years regarding that. And I anticipate there will be more. As you've noted, there are still a numerous amount of titles available for acupuncturists, which does get confusing. So So to wrap up and answer your question, it may be better to have us focus just on the curriculum, but also that since we're having this discussion, I anticipate that the stakeholders will provide where the curriculum will be housed in a degree program.
Thank you, Mr. Boudia, for your explanation. I think this is, for the public to understand. I think maybe this, I don't know how the education now is a collaborator working with the board, how closely work with the board, but I know this is being brought up in the past, and I know recently also just myself encountered many of those confusing here. But I totally understand, where the board is aligned, with the curriculum. But I think for the public protection side, how we will help to address these issues. But thank you for the clarification. I would say, invite the education accreditation, to discuss with that, because this has been ongoing for a while.
I can certainly reach out to the Accreditation Commission and request information and participation on a possible future agenda item addressing this.
Thank you.
And I wholeheartedly agree. This is very confusing. As a matter of fact, the board has worked with DCA on some consumer informational pieces, and there was a fair bit of an editing circle when it came to establishing which degrees actually applies to an acupuncturist and really listing them out to a consumer. I mean, just putting them out there like that, it can be confusing. Like, oh, so I have to look for all these different titles, or I have to figure that out. So yeah, your concern is warranted for sure.
Thank you, Mr. Boudia.
Certainly.
And Mr. Hurd, I see your hand is up.
Great, thank you. I just have a little bit to add on that one. Just some background on how the degrees are. With the ACOM's degree naming conventions, for the research doctorate that's done after licensure, that's the DAOM, that degree title is just limited to that one title. But for all of the master's programs that are approved and the first professional doctors approved, it's up to the program that's, or the agency that's applying for that degree to name that one. So it's, and that commission has been dealing with this naming thing for a good 10 years right now, and they haven't settled down with it. So but it would be in the accreditor's purview to limit the degrees to a certain title. The other thing to note too is because the master's degrees were so full of curriculum, the first professional doctorates often are identical to master programs, just with a different title at the end of it, right? So there's a lot of work to be done, with the curriculum, and there's a lot of debate between the member schools and the accreditor right now going down. So it's not really settling down, so they would be a welcome addition to our meeting as well. So I just want to give that background as well. Thank you for letting me speak.
Dr. Matecki, go ahead.
Okay, I don't want to be difficult, but thank you, Mr. Hurd. As you mentioned, I would just wondered, because of the board with the curriculum, you look at it with other board like nursing. This is something, sometimes I know a little bit. They have a different hours with a different titles. There is a licensed vocation nursing, there is a registered nursing, and then now there's a doctor nursing. So, but they have a different training hours. This is something the board, don't want to create more work for the board, but it is something the accreditation and the board can work on. It's like at least the publicly will know it. Currently we know there's a DOM. Or there's, masters like DTCM. So maybe there's some, how many hours you will earn some titles. Is this something the stakeholder will work on, or this is for the public would understand? For nursing, if we know your titles, LVN licensed vocational nurse, we know exactly how many years of training you get. And then RN, registered nursing, so that there's a different steps. I just thought, on this topic, I want to bring that in because the board, if it's work on the curriculum, if this something is in our jurisdiction, we can help or not. Or maybe, the hours dictate the titles.
Thank you, Dr. Moteki. That makes sense. And this has been helpful just to hear this in preparation for the stakeholder meeting. So I think with that, we will we'll exit this item, and it sounds like we have a good plan going forward.
Mr. President, if I may, since there was such a lengthy discussion after the public comment section, I would recommend we open it up to public comment just one more time.
Sure, absolutely.
Thank you. Moderator.
And this is the moderator, and we have reopened public comment for the discussion of the proposed stakeholder meeting. If you would like to make a comment, you can use the question mark icon, typically in the lower right corner of your computer screen or behind the 3-dot other options on the mobile device, and type the word comment and send, and each person will have 3 minutes to speak. And I do not see any requests for public comment. Shall I close that option?
Yes, please.
Thank you.
Okay. We'll move on to item number 8. And this is the discussion of possible action regarding the Acupuncture Board's executive officer salary increase. This is something that has been put in motion for years now to actually address Mr. Beaudea's salary and where he gets paid. And frankly, the intent of the board was to do this a long time ago. And we just were, through the years of his reviews, not able to check all the boxes and do it right. And now we have this teed up in our formal capacity to do this. And I do think we were supposed to have someone from HR, DCA here to help address any potential questions to the extent they arise. I'm not sure if that person is here, Mr. Beaudea. Can you help me confirm? I'm not sure we need to wait to go forward, but I do think that they were going to be here.
Definitely. We have Madam Trejo on the line.
Oh, great.
Able to address any questions we may have.
That's
Excellent.
correct. Thanks.
Great. Well, thank you so much for attending. We really appreciate it, and in helping prepare the report for this item. Mr. Beaudea did circulate the report of the accomplishments that Mr. Beaudea has overseen for the board over the last several years, and I hope that everyone on the board was able to review that. And I think that the record speaks for itself, and a lot of the accomplishments really are kind of couched in the board doing things, whether it be on the regulatory side, just on actually getting licensing program improvements to the test, the enforcement program, the administration, legislative action that we have helped and kind of guide through, regulatory changes, and again, just kind of organizational accomplishments that we have dealt with over the last several years, and then the independent, projects and studies, whether it's the computer-based testing, business modernization, and a lot of this the report is couched as the board, but I think we all know that Mr. Beaudea, Ben, has been so instrumental in all of that, really accomplishing those goals and those projects and getting it done frankly, with the help of the board, not the other way around. I think that we're the ones to get credit, but all of us who were doing it know that behind the scenes, Ben and staff were extremely instrumental in all of that. And I think that this list of accomplishments, frankly, doesn't really reflect a lot of what Ben has done, at least since he's taken over as executive officer, which was about a year prior to me joining the board. And because we are a fairly new board, Dr. Matecki is the senior stateswoman on this board and kind of can speak to a lot of it. But, on Ben's, I think, third day of serving as the executive officer, and I think in that point he was serving as the interim officer. He was testifying in front of the California legislature on sunset review. And so he was really thrown into the fire at a state when the acupuncture board was in a real kind of state of transition, and Dr. Matecki and other, previous board members can kind of speak to that. But Ben has done so much just to, I think, create a work environment for the board and for staff, and obviously for the licensees and members of the public who are getting these services, that is so much more functional, efficient, and responsive, that you can't really capture that in this list of accomplishments. And as a result, throughout the years when we've reviewed Mr. Baudet, we have recommended pay increases, and I think to the tune of 6%. And again, that is the fault of the board for not, for us not really getting the administration of it correct. But now we're doing that, and at this point, the recommendation is really for a 5% increase, because based on the recommendation of OHR, that is the maximum salary increase that they recommend. And I do think that as part of this, I would like not to put Dr. Matecki on the spot, but as our previous board president and as someone who really saw that transition as Ben was becoming the EO, kind of getting your perspective on what Ben has been able to do over these last few years would be really helpful. And then I will turn it over to Ben to kind of make a few comments. But Dr. Matecki, do you want to kind of just weigh in here and just add to what I've teed up and what the list of accomplishments really speaks to, please?
Thank you, Mr. President. You have well said about Ben. I can see here now, maybe I am the senior. I think I am the senior, has been worked with Ben for the past 6 years. Exactly correct. Ben took over acting EO 3 days later, sitting in the front of the legislature. And also I have seen when I joined the board, he just took over as executive officer. So we worked on so many issues and hours. I wanted to say is 2-3 o'clock in the morning, we will be still working in the office with the staff. So on my side, I have to say this. I thought I was working pretty hard as a physician, but I really respect how hard Ben can work also, Mr. Baudet. I may never tell you that. Not too many, staff or I have worked in the past, you never complain, always very patient, support the board members, regardless of the hours when we talk to you and call you, because it is right. The board was at a critical time when you step into the leadership. I'm really grateful, and also all the board members. I know Mr. Osorio is also worked many years here on the board now. And also I just see you never complained, and you just kind of like, okay, let's find the solution. worked with the staff. I apologize to everyone. I could not get you, the pay raise, the papers, and also maybe we did ask too much. I know we voted higher, but anyway, I'm so glad that this is being moved forward. And thank you, Mr. Herbal, and the president to move forward with this. So I'm very, very privileged, to work with you, Mr. Baudia, and the board is very fortunate to have you to work together.
Thank you, Dr. Mateki, and well said. And I do think that one thing I just want to mention as well, and I agree, Dr. Mateki encapsulated, just Ben is so hardworking and responsive. I don't remember a time where if I had a question or any day or night or needed to work through something, could be on a weekend, Ben has always been extremely responsive and willing to kind of work through it. So I think you hit the nail on the head. And I do want to make sure that Ben gets a chance to make any comments that he wishes to make. But before that, let's just make sure the board members, to the extent you guys have any questions or comments before I kind of turn to Ben, and that can be for Ms. Trejo. If you have any questions about this process or any of the list of accomplishments or anything, why don't we get any of those comments out and questions now, please?
Yes, I do agree with both Mr. President and Dr. Pataki regarding Ben, his professionalism and the way he has conducted himself with the staff and creating the atmosphere that is required to do an efficient and happy atmosphere for everybody to work. I do agree with everything that you guys said and have said. What Ben means to this board, and I think yes, he deserves that and more. So I just wanted to agree with you guys.
Thank you, Ruben. I appreciate that. Any other board members that have questions or comments?
Yeah, this is Member Kim. I believe this is way overdue agenda that we should consider. Considering looking back to all the things that happened since 2016. He's been done more than enough. So yeah, I wish you could give him a raise long time ago, but this is a good time to be on it. So that's my comment.
Thank you, Francisco. Any other comments or questions?
Yes, this is Shudong Li, and I agree to all the previous board members give the comments for our EO. I really myself really appreciate his help and support, and he's doing all the wonderful job, and hopefully he can get it, continue work on that. So my comments, I agree with all your previous board members' comments. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Shudong.
Yeah.
Dr. Chen?
Yes, thank you, Mr. President. So I think we have unanimous agreement about Dr. Badia, Mr. Eo Badia's performance. He has done excellent job for the board. So his leadership is phenomenal, and his hard work is really highly appreciated. And we already vote yes for increase his payment salary. This is just one way for me personally. Is one way to show express appreciation of what he has done for this board, for this profession, for the stakeholders, for California acupuncture patients. So I totally agree. So this is just an opportunity for me to say thank you, EO Badia, one more time. Thank you.
Thank you. And Ben, at this point, I think all the board members have spoken, and I just want to give you an opportunity to the extent that you wanted to put anything on record or make a comment. And then I do have a question for Ms. Trejo, but I want to give you the floor.
Thank you, Mr. President. I am humbled receiving such praise from each of you, board members. I have been here for 6 years, and it's been quite a journey. Very interesting experiences on learning how the current industry works at the executive level, both in learning with you as board members and receiving your professional perspectives, as well as the professional perspectives from our staff in their specialized areas. And speaking of staff, these accomplishments could only have been done with the support of my staff. And I'm very grateful that we've been able to pivot and change together. There was a number of quite monumental changes that we all endured in this transition. Changes to our statutes, changes to approval processes, changes to how our organization is structured. And it's been a learning experience the entire time. And while it's taxing, at the same time, it's invigorating in that I'm learning more ways in which I can be of service to you, to my staff, and to the public of California. So thank you very much for your praise.
Thank you, Ben, and appreciate everything you do and staff does, and it goes without saying, we couldn't do it without you and the staff, so much appreciated. Ms. Trejo, just 2 questions. One, I do believe that just according to the discussions we've had, the 5% is the max that we are able to go to for a pay increase. Is that right?
The typical request is usually 5%, but it's not the max. Common practice is that anything above 5% is not approved. And so most of the packages that we do receive includes 5% or sometimes even less than 5%.
Got it. And when you say not approved, do you mean by executive? It isn't approved per the board?
There's various levels. So it does go to the executive office here at the Department of Consumer Affairs. It'll go to our agency. A copy will be sent to the governor's office, and ultimately the California Department of Human Resources will be the final sayer. And right now with civil service classifications, merit-based salary increases are typically 5% until they reach the max of the salary level. And so we often see that they try to mirror that same amount with the exempt positions.
Okay, that's helpful to know. And the second question is, are we able to make this retroactive to apply to the beginning of the pay year? So if we voted for a 5% increase, does it only apply going forward, or can we make this retroactive to whenever the current fiscal year started?
You can submit the request with a retroactive effective date, but what we have seen is usually an effective date 30 days out from when the package is submitted to the executive office and agency.
Got it. I got it. Well, that's very helpful. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Appreciate it. My thinking on this, in light of that, is I think that there's an argument to be made, obviously, that Ben is owed more than 5%, especially given that we recommended a pay increase, almost 2 years ago. And so at this point, he would have had it and then, have been eligible for another pay increase. That being said, given what we just heard and kind of knowledge of the process, I don't want to put a pay increase in jeopardy by going above 5%, although I think he deserves it. So my thinking is for a recommendation of a 5%, but also to go retroactive to the beginning of the pay fiscal year, subject to obviously knowledge that that retroactivity may not be approved. Hopefully it would be, but I want the 5% approved if possible, and if possible, have it go retroactive. But I do hope that those are considered kind of separately, and that it isn't, to the extent that the retroactivity isn't approved, then the 5% isn't approved too. So that's where I'm thinking. And Mr. Baudet, I see your hand up, so please go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. President. Yes, just a point of clarification, we would need to do a motion for this. And then just to clarify on the merit salary adjustment of 5% that was noted earlier, that is for the classifications outside the excluded or exempt employees, as is my position. And that is done annually for the other classifications. They are eligible for 5% increase every year until they top out at their classification level assigned to them.
Got it. Okay, sorry. Just so I understand what your last comment was, are you trying to clarify that something that you think wasn't? And I'll let Ms. Trejo just kind of weigh in. Was there some disconnect there between what you just said and what Ms. Trejo said?
Ms. Trejo can confirm if I have this correctly, but our regular classifications, they are eligible to that 5% pay increase yearly. Should they merit that salary increase. And so just to contrast it with this one-time situation here, although thank you very much for noting the retroactive and requesting those items as well. So I'm just trying to distinguish that at the excluded level, at least in my level, it's not an automatic process. We go through this process every time to get a raise, whereas at the other classifications at 5%. But Madam Trejo, please correct me if I'm wrong.
No, you are correct. It is automatic if the increase is warranted for civil service employees and classifications, and for exempt positions such as the executive officer for the Acupuncture Board, it has to go through this process each and every time.
Okay, well, thank you. Thank you both for that clarification as well. So, and I do think that this is something, on a yearly basis that we have considered and we will continue to consider going forward. And now that we've mastered the process, if you will, I think it'll be a lot easier. So I do note that we do need a motion. Those are just my thoughts. I'm not making a formal motion, but if a board member wanted to make a motion, that would be my thought. But obviously, folks can introduce a motion as they see fit.
Mr. President, just to clarify, the proposed motion actually will be two proposed motions. Okay. One is the approve the 5%, and then the second one would be the retroactive application of that 5%.
That makes sense. Yeah, thank you, Fred. I agree. Okay. And I think just for efficiency, I know the board president doesn't necessarily always make motions, but they can. So why don't I just make both of those motions as stated, and I'll seek a second. As to the. Let me do them separately. My first motion is going to be to move for a 5% pay increase. But yeah.
I second that.
Okay. Right. Fred, would you like me to make? Would you like me to vote on the motion separately, or should I make both motions and then we just vote on each separately?
It should be voted separately because it's two separate things. Because technically again, this is what I'm about to say is no reflection on how I feel about Ben's performance as EO, which I think is spectacular. But it is possible that someone could approve the first motion but say no to the second one. So that for that purpose, for that hypothetical, you would need to vote on the first motion first, and then once that's approved, then do the second one.
Okay, thank you. So we do have Ms. Brodea. I made the motion. Mr. Osorio did second it.
And we would need public comments on both too.
Correct. Let's open this first one up for public comment.
So noted.
And this is the moderator, and we are opening WebEx's Q&A feature to facilitate public comment. If there is any comment on the initial motion, you can make it now. And we do have a request for comment from person logged in as Neil Miller. Neil, I'm going to send you a request to unmute your microphone, and you'll have 3 minutes.
Neil Miller from Cal Atma. I am probably the person who's attended more board meetings than anyone, and I've watched Ben go from his first day in the mailroom to and the level where the board was at. And they were sort of a joke as far as boards go. And at this point, this board is one of the most respected and most efficient boards that is running. And that's a direct reflection on Ben and Jay and their staff. I couldn't, I don't get to vote, but I can tell you that my opinion is that of all the associations that I'm aware of, the several associations that are associated with us, and anybody I know who's asked me a question that I have directed them to Ben or his staff have been attentive to the needs of the consumer. I can't change the motion, but while you were making the motion, and great points, Mr. Harabedian, was to make a motion or to amend the motion that it would be, you're recommending a 5 to 10% so that you would look at the low end and perhaps go above that. And now that I understand the process, this is something that the stakeholders could lobby the governor and let him know. And we intend to write a letter to the governor to let him know what a fine job that he's done. And what a pleasure it is to work with the board. And since I've been coming to board meetings for 3.5 decades, there's no board member, no executive officer who comes close to really grasping the responsibilities of the board, keeping the board on point, and informing the public on things that we need to know and where the board stands. He's really an exemplary executive officer. I'm surprised private enterprise hasn't grabbed somebody like him, because no matter what he touches, he has the skills to move into the position, understand all that needs to be understood, and execute. He's just really an executive officer I can't say enough about. And that's the end of my comment. Thank you.
And we did have a raised hand, although it's not raised now. If you would like to make a comment and you'd like to raise your hand to speak. And we're going to recognize Deborah, someone logged in as Deborah Matos. Deborah, I'm going to send you a request to unmute your microphone, and then you will have 3 minutes. And you're unmuted.
Have you heard right now? This is Deborah Matos.
Yes.
I want to speak on behalf of Ben. I have attended many meetings from the Acupuncture Board. I completely agree with everything Neil Miller said. I have been behind Ben for a very long time and hoping that the board would have selected him as executive officer. He does an amazing job. The staff is amazing. We did go through some very difficult times with the board. I'm the lobbyist for Southern California University of Health Sciences. So I have been through many different executive officers and seen the staff performance. I think the board's doing a great job now, and Ben has really helped all of you members because he has the experience and the intelligence and the patience. Lord knows you need the patience for the issues that you handle. So I'm speaking on behalf of the university and myself personally that I encourage you to, and the department, and anything that we can do to get him more than 5% is recommended. And thank you, Ben, for everything you've done.
And I do not see any other requests for public comment at this time. Shall I close the Q&A feature?
Yes, thank you.
You're welcome.
And I appreciate both of those comments. And to be clear, there can be a competing motion to this motion. This motion doesn't have to be set in stone. So to the extent board members would like to seek a higher than 5% or some sort of range, the floor is open to make another motion. And I just do want to note that this is not going to be, I think this will be a yearly thing that the board will now more consistently consider given everything that has happened. And so I do want that to be known, but I do think that, look, if it were me, I would want Ben to get more than 5%. So we're kind of stuck in this weird, difficult spot. Dr. Moteki, did you want to say something, or are you just?
Yes, I'm just going to raise my hand. I totally agree with you. I think on the safe side, we heard from the public and also board members, but I think just from the past experience, I think on the safe side, we really want to succeed this time. So I would not change the motion. Let's leave it 5%, and I would recommend it. We will do this on the yearly basis. So hope we can do some catch up. I would support your motion not to change because I really want Mr. Bodia to get paid. So that would I recommend.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Moteki. Any other board member comments before we do the roll call vote? Ms. Bodea, let's do the vote.
Certainly, and a great big thank you again to the board members and to the members of the public, our stakeholders that have commented as well. It's an honor to serve. The motion on the table is to approve Benjamin Bodia for a 5% salary increase of his executive officer salary. Motion by President Harbirian, seconded by Vice President Osorio. Members, when you hear your name, kindly state whether or not you aye or nay. Harbirian?
Yes.
Osorio?
Yes.
Moteki?
Yes.
Chen?
Yes.
Kim?
Yes.
Lee?
Yes.
Motion passes. Thank you very much, board.
Thank you, Ben. And thank you to the members that spoke in favor as well. The second motion that I'd like to make, or excuse me, I don't need to make the motion. I'd rather not make the motion. So I've already made clear what I would like to see happen. But Dr. Moteki, would you like to make the motion?
Yes, let me make that. Thank you. So I would say motion for Mr. Bodia's salary increase retroactively back to, I know there's a 30 days. How do I phrase that? Maybe Ms. Trejo or Mr. Bodia, you can help on that. So I wanted to retroactively from the time allowed. How about that?
Certainly. Go ahead.
Go ahead, Mr. Bodia.
I wanted to clarify, how far back were you looking for the retroactive?
As allowed.
So the board can put forth a recommended effective date. I'm not sure if I heard earlier that you were considering the effective being at the beginning of the year.
Yes.
Right.
So that would be the motion. I did mention that typically when these packages are submitted, then we oftentimes see an effective date 30 days out, but not retro. So I'm not sure if that was not clear.
So the motion would say start from the calendar year, would say this year.
Correct.
The pay increase.
Correct.
Correct. January 1st, January 2nd being the first business day of 2022.
Okay. So I will move Mr. Beau, executive officer salary start increase from January 1st, 2022.
So noted. Thank you. Do I have a second?
I second. This is member Yongkin Chen.
Thank you, Dr. Chen, for your second. This item is ready to be open to public comment, Mr. President.
Please do.
And this is the moderator, and we are opening the Q&A feature of WebEx for public comment. If you'd like to comment on the retroactive motion, you may look for the question mark inside a box, typically in the lower right of your computer screen. Type the word comment and click send. Another option is to raise your hand to recognize to be seen. And we do have a request for comment from someone logged in as Neil Miller. Neil, I'm going to send you a request to unmute your microphone, and you will have 3 minutes.
My name is Neil Miller. I simply would like to state for the record that our association stands in support of the motion, and let the minutes reflect that there are people who are supporting this out in the public. Thank you.
And I do not see any other requests for public comment at this time. Shall I close that public comment feature?
Yes, please.
Thank you.
Thank you, board members. We're now ready to take the vote. The motion on the table is to provide the executive officer a salary increase effective date retroactive to January 1st, 2022. When you hear your name, please let me know if you support or oppose this decision. Arabidian.
Yes.
Osorio.
Yes.
Mateki.
Yes.
Chen.
Yes.
Kim.
Yes.
And Lee.
Yes.
Motion passes. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
The floor is back to you, Mr. President.
No, I appreciate that. And I do just want the record to note that the board again had tried and thought that we had instituted pay increases almost 2 years ago now, and the retroactivity it was made in light of that, and we do think this is a unique circumstance, and we do hope that DCA and specifically HR and the governor's office does note that this was something that the board felt we failed to do this earlier, even though we had intended to and thought we did. So I just want that to be clear. So thank you.
Thank you. The record will reflect that.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Baudet. Ms. Trejo, thank you so much for helping with this, and we appreciate you being with us.
Of course. Once you have the accomplishments ready, you can submit those to Nicole, the Human Resources Chief. And then once we have received the accomplishments, we will begin preparing the package.
Great. Thank you very much. We will now move on to item number 9. I believe that's public comment for items not on the agenda. There you go. And that should be item number 9. And
correct.
We will open this up. Ms. Fisher, I think we can open this up for items not on the agenda for public comment.
Thank you for the instruction. I've now opened up the Q&A feature of WebEx. If you would like to suggest a topic for my apologies. If you have public comments for items that were not on this agenda, you may use the Q&A feature. And we have a request for comment from Neil Miller. Neil, I'm going to send you a request to unmute, and you'll have 3 minutes.
Neil Miller from CalAtma. Once again, I'd say that 3 minutes is very difficult to really share with the board on any item, significant comment that can have an impact from a practitioner standpoint, or even a consumer, a public person. So I understand the format, but I just wanted to point that out as I wasted 30 seconds of my 3 minutes. Stakeholders mean more than associations and schools. That there are 10,000 practitioners that are not associated with schools and don't belong to an association. And I think that the board used to send out a newsletter, and we've talked about this in the past, but this meeting that's coming up in May is really important. And I think that it would be incumbent on the board to get a more thorough feedback, is to put it out there. But at the same time, I don't think you're prepared if 200 people show up and want to make comment. And basically what you have is a couple of associations and a lot of the schools. But this is a big issue. This is an issue that is on the minds of a lot of people. So just to keep that in mind. There are various titles that serve the schools, but not necessarily the consumer. My students who are graduating now, by next year will be calling themselves doctor. And those people like myself and people who've been practicing for decades, my title says proficient in Oriental medicine. So I got my license before there was a master's program and a doctoral program. And what we really need to focus on is curriculum competent education. And the idea of the various titles and the degrees has to do with the schools and the Accreditation Commission. And those they're in favor of what works nationally. And this is what the whole Little Hoover Commission and where this board had to go to, were to identify those issues. And I want to not remind the board, but just to bring it out publicly, that the issue here is what's best for California. And many things have changed over the last 30 years. And the consumer in California has a much higher expectation of our abilities. We are in Kaiser hospitals all through Northern California on staff. That kind of education, it changes. And lastly, Mr. Harbedian, I'm very glad that you are the new chairman of the board. And I'd like to thank Dr. Mataki for doing such a great job. But Mr. Harbedian, you have a unique position as a public
30
member.
seconds.
And you've now been here for a couple of years to understand the public's comments. So I hope that going forward, when we look at future agenda items and public comment, that you can kind of incorporate what you've learned over the last several years, because many of those comments are not making it onto the agenda. And there are issues that we could take a look at that would really help the board do a much better job at regulating the profession and protecting the consumer. So good luck to all of the members, and I appreciate all of you. And thank you, Ben, for doing such an exemplary job for so long.
And I do not see any other requests for public comment at this time. Shall I close public comment?
Yes, please.
Thank you.
And any comments from board members, either addressing Mr. Miller's comments or anything else?
Mr. President, I mean the public comments for future agenda items, because technically speaking, board members aren't supposed to respond to public comments on items not on the agenda.
Yeah, we've talked about this before. I guess I'm just not, if it's an agendized item and a public member makes a comment for items not on the agenda, it's just.
I think it's fine if a member of the public were to bring back an item on the agenda in this section, and you as the president has the authority to go back and re-examine that agenda item, but it does have to be an agenda item.
Okay, so hypothetically, if one of the board members, I'm just trying to clarify, if a board member heard an item that's not on the agenda, and maybe this is for future agenda items, so we can just wait for that. But yeah, I think I'm clear on it. I just want to make sure that if a board member had a question or a comment or wanted to kind of articulate something or highlight something that a public member just made as an item that's not on the agenda, we're just not supposed to do that at this time.
Yeah, other than like, hey, this item is should be of interest to the board. Let's discuss that at the future agenda. Discuss that in a future meeting. That I think that's the extent that the.
Well, and I do think we have that makes sense. We do have a future. I think we have an agenda item for future.
Yeah, it's next. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, yeah, that makes sense. Thanks, Fred. Okay, well, I think given that, then we can close this item and move on to the next, which, aptly speaking, I think goes exactly to where I was headed. So we can move on to the next item, and this would be future agenda items. So this is where I think board members, I will open it up, and whether it's independent items that weren't just mentioned, or any item that board members would like to put on future agenda items, please weigh in, comment now.
Mr. President, I have Dr. Mateki's future agenda item. If she wishes to confirm, she mentioned earlier she wanted to discuss the degree, the various degrees within the profession of acupuncture.
Thank you, Mr. Bodia. Thank you, Mr. President. Yes, correct. I would like to propose for that for the future agenda.
Okay.
And I believe you also wanted to invite the accreditators to speak on that in the schools.
I will defer to you and the staff, because I don't know how the process, but I think for the public, just, early we heard also it's for the public information, however you guys want to make it work. But I just think this questions being brought up for a while. However you guys want to do, I will defer to you.
Sorry to budge in there. I apologize. I didn't mean to interrupt. Go ahead.
No, I just said deferred to EO, Mr. Bodia, how your team want to, bring the education here, or however you guys are going to have the dialogue.
Certainly, we can discuss, the president and I can discuss and bring you into the discussion on how to bring this up at a future board meeting.
And can you just, and to that end, what specifically are we agendizing for the future? I just want to make sure I'm understanding it. I'm sorry.
Certainly. Dr. Mateki, would you like to?
Just a discussion about the education, the acupuncture, the titles, various degrees, various title. I think it's very confused for the public. So maybe discussion of their titles. At least public will understand if you use what a title means, what. Early we heard, right? New graduate is a doctor title, 40 years practice, no doctor title.
Okay.
I get put on that spot all the time, who to refer.
Got it. That makes sense. Yep.
Thank you.
Thank you. Board members, any additional items? I do want to open this up to the public again, and while board members may be weighing in, and I'm going to prompt Mr. Miller or anyone else, because we hear you, and I have heard you, and I think other board members have heard you about items that aren't on agendas that you believe aren't being addressed. And so I just want you to take the opportunity, to the extent you'd wish, during public comment on this agenda item, to just specifically lay out exactly what you would like the board to be addressing, and then we will decide whether we will or not. But I just want to make sure that I have a clear sense of what hasn't been addressed. I know we've wrestled with this before and tried, I think, to address everything, but it's obvious that from your perspective we haven't. So I would like to hear more about that. And I'm not seeing any board member with a hand up. So why don't we open this up for public comment?
Sorry, Mr. President, my hand
Okay.
is up.
Sorry, yeah, and if okay, you're at the bottom there. I apologize. Go ahead, Dr. Chen.
Okay, thank you, Mr. President. So I wonder if we can, in the next meeting, we can have agenda about the result of the stakeholder meeting. So we'll have stakeholder meeting May 20. Do we have enough time to analyze the stakeholder meetings, like discussion and the conclusion? It's possible to put that in June's meeting agenda.
Thank you.
That's my question.
Yep. Mr.
suggestion.
Baudet? Yep, I think that makes a lot of sense. Mr. Baudet, does that give you enough time?
In terms of having a formal presentation at the board meeting, including all the documentation submitted and an analysis of it, usually by that point we've wrapped by, let's say, May 20th, with our board meeting being the 16th and 17th of June, we've wrapped up the final products for what will be in the materials. So we would be somewhat hard pressed to do the analysis and do a last minute submission. We would prefer to do a more thorough analysis and be able to provide that to you at a later board meeting, most likely the August or December meeting, should the strategic plan allow time for.
Dr. Chen?
Yes.
We would want to do it this year. We would hope to do it this year prior to the sunset hearing.
Yeah. That'd be great. So maybe depend on how much discussion, how much material we need to review, how much input from stakeholder, from the school educators. Maybe I just say possible June, right? Maybe too much material, then we want to start a discussion and then put it in August. Okay, that's something. Just we want to feedback to all the stakeholders. When they input all the information, they probably expect us to give them some feedback in the next board meeting. That's what was my thinking. But depends, I understand that depends on how much work the staff have to do. Totally understand. Thank you, Ms. Padilla.
Certainly.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think if nothing else, we can get a agendized kind of just a quick update, if nothing else, just to see how things went. I don't think that we can be precluded from that. So I think it's a good point. And Ben, can you just remind us, if we're not going to get a full-blown analysis by the June meeting, when is our August meeting that we would get that?
Let me double check. At the moment, we only have our first two meetings of the year posted because we're not sure of where the whether or not we can have the remote, hybrid, or in-person scenario. But we can discuss that when we next meet.
Great. Okay. Any other future agenda items, board members? Okay, let's open this up for public comment, please.
And this is the moderator. I've opened up the Q&A feature of WebEx for public comment on future agenda items. If you have a suggestion, I would encourage you to use the Q&A feature, put comment in the text box and click send, or you may raise your hand. We do have a request for comment from someone logged in as Neil Miller. Neil, I've sent your request to unmute and you will have 3 minutes.
Hi, this is Neil Miller. Boy, if we were all in person, it would be lonely. It would be just me and all of you. Anyway, thank you, Mr. Harabedian, for bringing that back to me. I'm sorry if I spoke off the agenda for future agenda items. I didn't realize we were having it. I didn't look at it clearly enough. But we've talked about the issue of bleeding and the more current term that's being used by the Accreditation Commission. And the term Asian massage and manual therapy. And I'd like to point out that previous boards have made an effort, and going back to my recollection, 4 legal counsels have agreed with our argument that these things could be changed in regulation. And we have brought these things to the legislature, who said, go back to the board and they can change this in regulation. And somehow the board changes and we go again and again and again over the same issues. So if you read the Little Hoover Commission, both of those things are pointed out in the Little Hoover Commission, which is in the early 90s. So that would be a good agenda item with which to address. I'd like to see a more in-depth analysis or a task force that addresses the occupational analysis, because there's a wealth of information in there that could really assist the board in regulating the profession and doing a better job at protecting the consumer. I'd like to point out that have on a future agenda item a bill that's already passed, AB 736. It was chapter 44, which has to do with nonprofit schools having a minimum wage that they have to pay professors. And this went into effect 2 years ago. No nonprofit schools that I'm aware of are complying with this. Next year, there will be penalties. And if you understand the language of this bill, and I've had legal representation look at it, so I hope, Mr. Harbinian, you'll look at this. But this will put half of our nonprofit schools out of business within the next year or two. This is a red alarm that we really need to address, and I think that we can address it with the legislature, because I don't think the intention of the bill was to drive small schools with, small number of students compared to Stanford and other nonprofits. So there's a big difference between Stanford and some of our schools, but this should be
30
discussed
seconds.
because it will put a lot of our schools out of business. And Senate Bill 1080, which is a bill that passed this past week in Arizona, and it addresses a number of issues that we have been going over and over and over again that they've now passed into law. But one that I'd like to point out is acupuncture assistants. And I would like to hire students who are quite capable of taking blood pressure and pulling needles out. And it's very specific about what assistants can and cannot do. And I
3
think that this
minutes.
would.
And I do not see any other raised hands or requests for public comment at this time. Shall I close the Q&A feature?
Yes, please.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Miller. So I'm seeing this really as 3 or 4 different items. The first is the bleeding Asian massage manual therapy kind of terminology / diction that's in either the legislation or the regulations. We've talked about this a number of times, and so I think what we'll do is try to set up a meeting with you, me, and the executive officer, Mr. Bodea, just so we can learn a little bit more about. I mean, it's clear enough as to exactly the issues that you're pointing out, and then we just need to figure out the proper way, whether we're able to address it in the regs or whether this is for the legislature. And we hear what you're saying. The occupational analysis. I mean, frankly, I think last meeting we spent a fair amount of time. I mean, going over. Mr. Bodea can weigh in on this, but we went over specifically that during its own agendized discussion item, which then prompted the stakeholder meeting. So I'm not. Look, we could spend, and I think a lot of us mentioned at that time, you could spend a whole year going over it, and I have no doubt. But there is a point of efficiency and just a limited amount of time that the board has, and so we are pushing forward with the occupational analysis, and we're doing the stakeholder meeting, and that will come back in August. So I think we're addressing that. As to AB 736, the nonprofit schools, this isn't. I think we can discuss that in our meeting and just figure out exactly whether that falls within our purview of protecting the public. I think that you could argue it both ways. So let's just try to discuss that more. The Senate bill in Arizona, I hear you as to what is going on there. That falls to me, that feels squarely a legislative issue that really is outside of our purview. Not that I understand that that's an Arizona bill, and what you're arguing for is that this should be happening here, or that acupuncture should be able to hire students and assistants. But that to me does not feel within our purview. But I may be wrong. But we've heard you, and we'll have Mr. Bodea reach out and try to schedule a meeting. But Ben, can you address? If you can, too, the occupational analysis, just so we're on the same page. I mean, I feel like we are actually bearing down on that pretty aggressively. And then AB 736, I'm not sure if we have any plans to discuss that or how that's affected, if we've heard from any of the schools. But I don't want to put you on the spot, and maybe we can put a pin in it and discuss it during our individual meeting.
Thank you, Mr. President. Yeah, in regards to the occupational analysis, that was a survey of the practices that are used currently by our California licensees within this jurisdiction. Mr. Miller, I believe, is referring to additional items added to scope, which he did note would require legislative change, as well as clarifying the definition of some items in regulation, it sounds like, where that would be beneficial to meet and flesh out, or to hear Mr. Miller or Cal Atma's position on this as to how we can look at a regulatory change for that and the justifications thereof. In regards to AB 736, this did come across my desk this week. We are looking into it. It does affect our schools. It does not affect our licensees. It may affect the students if their tuition goes up to adjust for the compensation that would be required. I'm trying to confirm if AB 736 is already in law or it's a bill that has just been proposed. So we'll see. When we next meet, we can get more information for you. And also, I was able to identify that September 15th and 16th is the tentatively scheduled fall meeting dates.
Got it. Thanks. That makes sense. So we'll be in contact with Mr. Miller.
Noted. Thank you.
Okay. And I believe that brings us to the end of this agenda item, and I think our meeting, unless I'm mistaken here.
Nope, that was our last item.
Okay.
Just adjournment remaining.
Great. Well, I will entertain a motion to adjourn, or we can just adjourn. Fred, I forget what.
Yeah, you don't need one. You don't need one. You don't need one.
Right. Well, thank you, everyone. I appreciate it, and we will see each other real soon. Hopefully before the June 16th meeting, but if not, we'll see you there. And thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, board members.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank
everyone.
you. Thank you.